The cathedral doors slam shut behind her, and Elena Carter runs. Mascara is bleeding down her face, and her wedding dress is dragging through rain-soaked streets. 200 guests just watched Ryan Whitmore destroy her at the altar, calling her a mistake his family can't afford. Her mother's medical bills are drowning her. Her apartment lease ends in 3 days. She has nothing left. Then a black car pulls up beside her, and a man she's never met leans out. He tells her to get in. He says he has a proposition that will make Ryan Whitmore regret every word he just said. The rain came down in sheets, which felt appropriate, like the universe itself had decided to weep for Elena Carter's spectacular humiliation. She stumbled down the cathedral steps, her wedding dress already ruined, the hem black with grime and water. Behind her, the massive oak doors remained firmly shut, as if the building itself wanted to forget she'd ever been inside. 200 people had just watched her fiancé destroy her. Not quietly, not privately. Ryan Whitmore had done it at the altar, with the priest standing right there, with both families seated in the front pews. He'd waited until the moment when the priest asked if anyone objected to the union. Then he'd turned to face the crowd himself. He said that he objected to the marriage. He explained that Elena Carter is not the woman he thought she was. He called her a fraud who hid her family's poverty, her mother's gambling debts, and her own desperate financial situation. He finished by saying his family deserves better than a gold digger. Elena had stood there frozen, the bouquet trembling in her hands, unable to process what was happening. Her mother, pale and sickly in the third row, had let out a strangled sound. Ryan's mother, Victoria Whitmore, had looked pleased. It had all been a setup, a calculated public execution. She tried to speak to defend herself, but Ryan had already turned to the priest. He said there will be no wedding today, and asked the priest to please escort Miss Carter out. Miss Carter. She wasn't even his fiancée anymore, just a mistake to be removed. Now she ran blindly through streets she barely recognized, her mind spinning in useless circles. The wedding planner had chosen this cathedral specifically because of its location in the historic district. It was far from Elena's modest neighborhood, deep in the heart of old money. She didn't even know which direction would take her home. Not that home mattered anymore. She'd given up her apartment lease 3 weeks ago, planning to move into Ryan's penthouse after the honeymoon. Her few belongings were in storage. She had $247 in her checking account and a credit card that was maxed out. She had been trying to contribute to wedding expenses that Ryan had insisted weren't proper for his family to cover entirely. Her mother was in a nursing facility that cost $6,000 a month. This was money Elena had been scraping together through 2 jobs while Ryan promised that after the wedding he'd take care of everything. She'd believed him like an idiot. She'd believed every word. The rain soaked through her dress, making the fabric cling to her skin. She needed to find shelter, needed to think, needed to figure out what the hell she was going to do now. But her legs kept moving, carrying her down one street and then another. She went past shops that were closed for Sunday, past cafes with people staring out windows at the crazy woman in a ruined wedding dress. She finally stopped in an alley between 2 buildings, pressing her back against cold brick, trying to catch her breath. The tears came then, hot and angry and useless. She'd spent 3 years with Ryan, 3 years of carefully meeting every expectation his family set, of learning which fork to use at formal dinners, of pretending she didn't notice how his mother looked at her clothes and her background like they were stains to be scrubbed away. And for what? So he could destroy her in front of everyone who mattered in this city? Someone called out her name, Elena Carter. She jerked her head up. A man stood at the mouth of the alley. He was tall, dark-haired, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than her mother's monthly care. He wasn't from the wedding. Everything about him commanded attention, from his sharp features to the way he stood perfectly still, watching her with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. She asked him how he knew her name. Her voice came out ragged. He replied that he knew quite a bit about her. He stepped closer and she tensed, but something in his posture wasn't threatening. It was assessing. He told her he knew she was a surgical nurse at Metropolitan. He knew she'd been supporting her mother since she had her stroke 2 years ago. And he knew Ryan Whitmore strung her along until today because his family needed a distraction. They were restructuring their assets to avoid a fraud investigation. Elena's breath caught. She asked what he meant. The man said simply that the Whitmores are broke and have been for 6 months. They've been selling off properties and businesses, funneling money through shell corporations. Today's wedding was supposed to be their coming out party. It was proof that they're still on top, still powerful enough to marry into old society families. He explained that her family might not have money, but her bloodline goes back 4 generations in this city, and that mattered to them. So why did they do it? He said it's because they've decided to cut their losses and run. Ryan's father is moving the family to London next week, and they can't afford any anchors. She was the anchor. He tilted his head. He said the public humiliation was intentional. It ensures she won't have the social capital to ask questions or cause problems for them. The words landed like physical blows. Elena's knees felt weak. She asked who he was. His name was Luca Duca. He said it like she should recognize the name. When she didn't react, something flickered in his expression. Approval, maybe. He told her he had a proposition for her. He explained that her mother's facility sent her discharge papers yesterday. She had 72 hours to arrange alternative care or pay the outstanding balance of $18,000. Her apartment was already rented to new tenants. She had no job to go back to tomorrow because she quit 2 weeks ago when Ryan convinced her that working wasn't appropriate for a Whitmore wife. He paused, then asked if he missed anything. Elena felt like she was going to be sick. He was right about all of it. She'd been so focused on the wedding, on becoming the person Ryan's family needed her to be, that she'd systematically dismantled every safety net she had. She quietly asked what he wanted. He wanted her to marry him instead. The laugh that escaped her was brittle. He said he was practical, not insane. He moved closer and she could see his eyes were dark gray like storm clouds. He told her she needed money, security, and revenge. He said he needed a wife who understands that marriage can be a business transaction and who won't have unrealistic expectations about love and fidelity. They would both get what they want. She asked why he would possibly need that. He said his reasons were his own, but he was offering her a way out of the hole Ryan Whitmore just threw her into. He pulled out a phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward her. He told her to read the contract he was proposing. Elena stared at the document on the screen. It was detailed, professional, and utterly surreal. The marriage duration was a minimum of 3 years. The financial terms included all her debts cleared immediately. She would get a $10,000 monthly allowance and full medical care for her mother in a top-tier facility. Her obligations were to appear with him at social and business functions, maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage, and sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. She repeated that this was insane, but her voice was weaker now. Luca's tone didn't change. He said this was survival. He told her that in 10 minutes he was getting back in his car. If she came with him, they'd be married by tomorrow morning. He had connections at the courthouse. If she didn't, she was on her own with no money, no home, and a mother who needs care she can't provide. She pointed out that she didn't even know him. He said he knew enough. He described her as proud but not stupid, loyal but not a martyr. And he said that right now she was angry enough to take a risk if it meant Ryan Whitmore would see her win. He lowered the phone and asked if he was wrong. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to tell this stranger to go to hell and figure things out on her own, but the truth was staring her in the face. She had nothing. No leverage, no options, no time. The image of Ryan's satisfied smile as she'd fled the cathedral made something dark and furious coil in her chest. She said slowly that if she said yes, what would happen to the Whitmores? Luca's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. He asked what she wanted to happen to them. She said she wanted them to regret it, all of it. He replied that they had an agreement. He held out his hand and told her to come with him, so they could give them something to regret. She looked at his hand for a long moment. This was crazy. She didn't know this man. She didn't know what his real motives were. She didn't know what she was actually agreeing to. Every rational part of her brain was screaming to walk away. But she was so tired of being rational. Being rational had gotten her humiliated at the altar. Elena placed her wet, trembling hand in his. His grip was warm and steady. She whispered, "All right, let's do it." Luca's car was a black Mercedes with tinted windows and leather seats that probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe. A driver opened the door for her without comment on her bedraggled appearance, and she slid inside, suddenly aware of how ridiculous she must look in a wedding dress and all. Luca got in beside her and immediately pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. He said they were going to his house first. She would need clothes and time to compose herself before they handled the legal paperwork. He asked where she lived. She told him North Shore. He didn't look up from his phone. Elena blinked. North Shore was where the real money lived. Estates with gates and security houses that appeared in architectural magazines. Ryan's family had a property there, though they'd been trying to sell it for months. According to what Luca had said, she said she couldn't just disappear. He finally looked at her and said her mother was being transferred to Brightwater Manor as they spoke. He had made the arrangements while she was deciding. He told her he handled things efficiently. She asked if he was that sure she'd say yes. He replied he was that sure she was smart enough to recognize an opportunity. He gestured to a small bar built into the car's interior. He said there was water and whiskey if she needed it. She grabbed the water, her hands still shaking. She asked why he was doing this, and told him not to say it was just because he needed a wife. Rich men don't need to rescue ruined brides in alleys for that. He agreed she was right. Luca put his phone away and turned to face her fully. He needed a wife who was presentable, intelligent enough to handle high society functions, and who won't ask questions about his business. Most importantly, he needed someone who has no connections to the families he works with, someone who won't be a security risk. She asked what business he was in. He said several, like import and export, real estate, and private security consulting. His tone made it clear that was all the details she'd get. He explained that what matters is that being married provides him certain advantages in negotiations and appearances. And having a wife with an interesting backstory, the woman who was humiliated by Ryan Whitmore, only to land on her feet spectacularly, will make those appearances even more effective. Elena said flatly that she was a prop. He replied they were both props in each other's arrangements, and that's what makes it fair. He studied her face and asked if she was having second thoughts. She should be. But the alternative was going back to nothing, to watching her mother deteriorate in some state facility while Elena scrambled for jobs that wouldn't hire her because Ryan's family had probably already poisoned every well in the city. So she said no second thoughts. But she wanted to know what she was actually walking into. She asked what he meant when he said he handled several businesses. Luca was quiet for a moment, and Elena got the distinct impression he was deciding how much truth to give her. Finally, he said that it means he operates in spaces where the law is more of a guideline than a rule. He has enemies, which is why security at his home is extensive. He has allies who are dangerous people, and he has a reputation for being someone you don't cross. She realized he was in the mafia. It wasn't a question. He said that was a simplistic term for a complex reality, but essentially yes. He said it so calmly, like he was discussing the weather. He asked if that changed her answer. It should. It absolutely should. But Elena found herself thinking about Ryan's face, about his mother's pleased smile, about the 200 people who'd watched her get destroyed and done nothing. Instead, she asked if she would be in danger. He said no, she'd have security, and he was very good at keeping his world separate from his personal life. As long as she followed the rules in the contract and didn't ask questions about things that don't concern her, she'd be perfectly safe. And if she broke the rules, he said then they'd have a different conversation. His tone made it clear she wouldn't enjoy that conversation, but he didn't think she would. He said she was too smart for that. The car pulled through an iron gate and up a long driveway lined with trees. The house that came into view was massive, 3 stories of stone and glass with grounds that stretched in every direction. Elena felt her stomach drop. This wasn't just wealthy, this was powerful. Luca said dryly, "Welcome home," noticing her expression. He told her to try not to look too overwhelmed at public events. He explained that part of selling this marriage is her appearing comfortable in this world. Elena muttered that she'd do her best. The driver opened her door, and she stepped out onto cobblestones, acutely aware that she was still wearing a ruined wedding dress. A woman appeared at the front door, older with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor. Luca came around the car and said this was Teresa, who manages the household staff. He introduced Elena Carter to Teresa. He explained that she'll be staying here and tomorrow she'll be Elena Duca. Teresa's expression didn't flicker. She said, "Of course, sir." She then asked Miss Carter to follow her, and she'd show her to her room and arrange for some appropriate clothing. Elena managed a thank you. She followed Teresa into the house, through a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than her mother's medical bills. They went up a curved staircase and down a hallway lined with art that looked museum quality. Teresa opened a door to a bedroom that was bigger than Elena's entire former apartment. Teresa pointed and said the bathroom was through there. She would have clothing brought up within the hour. Dinner was at 7 o'clock if Elena would like to join Mr. Duca, or she could have something sent to her room. Elena quickly said she'd eat in her room. She needed time to process this, to figure out what she just agreed to. Teresa said very well, and asked if there was anything else she needed. Elena asked for a phone charger, saying hers died during, but she couldn't finish the sentence. Teresa said she'd bring one immediately. She paused at the door and said that Mr. Duca is many things, but he keeps his word. If he's promised her something, he'll deliver. Then she was gone, leaving Elena alone in a bedroom that belonged in a magazine spread. She walked to the window and looked out at manicured grounds that seemed to go on forever. In the distance, she could see a pool house and what looked like a tennis court. 24 hours ago, she'd been putting final touches on her wedding day timeline, excited about marrying Ryan and starting their life together. Now she was standing in a stranger's mansion, having agreed to marry a man who'd just admitted to being in the mafia. All because she had no other choice. Elena caught sight of herself in a full-length mirror and almost laughed at the absurdity. She looked like something from a horror movie. Her wedding dress was destroyed, her makeup was running down her face, and her hair was plastered to her head. The girl in that mirror looked broken. But as Elena stared at her reflection, she felt something else rising beneath the shock and fear. Something that felt like anger, sharp and clarifying. Ryan had thrown her away like garbage. His family had used her and discarded her, and they'd done it publicly, confident that she had no power to fight back. They were wrong. Elena turned away from the mirror and started working on the buttons of the ruined dress. Luca Duca might be using her for his own purposes, but she'd use him right back. This marriage would give her security, revenge, and a chance to rebuild. And when she walked back into that world that had watched her fall, she'd make sure everyone understood Elena Carter was done being a victim. The next morning came too fast. Elena had barely slept, spending most of the night reading through the contract Luca had sent to a tablet Teresa delivered with her clothes. The document was thorough to the point of being invasive, detailing everything from public behavior expectations to financial arrangements to what would happen if either of them wanted out before the 3-year minimum. What struck her most was how cold it all was. This wasn't a marriage. It was a merger with extremely specific terms and conditions. At 8 a.m., there was a knock on her door. Luca's voice came through. He said the courthouse appointment is at 10 o'clock and they needed to leave in 45 minutes. Elena stared at the ceiling. This was it. Last chance to back out, to say this was insane and take her chances on her own. She got up and went to the closet where Teresa had hung several outfits. For a wedding at the courthouse, she chose something simple, a cream-colored dress that was elegant without being bridal, paired with a blazer that gave her a sense of armor. When she came downstairs, Luca was waiting in the foyer. He changed into a different suit, charcoal gray this time, and he studied her appearance with the same assessing look from yesterday. He said she cleaned up well. It wasn't a compliment, just an observation. She said thanks, she thought. He explained the ceremony will be quick. He had 2 witnesses arranged, his lawyer and his assistant. After they signed the paperwork, they'd return here. He told her tonight there was a charity gala he needed to attend, and she'd come with him as his wife. Elena's stomach dropped. She said tonight was too fast. She couldn't do it. Luca's tone was firm, but not unkind. He told her she could and she will. The faster they established marriage publicly, the faster the benefits would kick in for both of them. He said, Ryan Whitmore and his family will be at that gala. It was her first opportunity to show them exactly how far she'd risen from yesterday. The mention of Ryan made something burn in Elena's chest. She asked what he would tell people about them. She meant they'd want to know how they met. He said they'd keep it simple and close to the truth. They met months ago through mutual friends, kept things private. And when her wedding fell through, he saw an opportunity. People will fill in the romantic details themselves. They always do. And if someone asks why he'd marry a woman who was publicly humiliated yesterday, Luca's expression was unreadable. Then he said he'd tell them he doesn't give a damn about the opinions of people like the Whitmores, which happens to be true. They rode to the courthouse in silence. Elena's mind was spinning with everything that was about to happen. In less than an hour, she'd be married to a man she didn't know, bound by a contract that read like a business deal, stepping into a world she didn't understand. The courthouse ceremony was exactly as impersonal as she'd expected. A judge, who was clearly doing Luca a favor, handled the paperwork efficiently. The vows were the standard legal version. No personal touches, no emotion. When the judge said he could kiss the bride, Luca leaned in and gave her a brief, chaste kiss that felt more like sealing a contract than celebrating a union. The lawyer congratulated them and handed them copies of the marriage certificate. He called her Mrs. Duca. Mrs. Duca. Elena Carter was gone. She'd been erased twice in 2 days, once by Ryan, once by her own choice. Back in the car, Luca made phone calls while Elena stared at the marriage certificate in her hands. The document made it real in a way nothing else had. Luca put his phone away and asked if she was having second thoughts. She said she was just processing. He told her not to process too long. They needed to prep her for tonight. She asked what he meant by prepping her. He explained the people at that gala will be looking for weakness. They'll want to know if she's worth their time or if she's just another gold digger who lucked into money. She needed to walk in there like she belonged, like marrying him was always the plan, and Ryan Whitmore was just a stepping stone she'd already forgotten. She said that was a lot to pull off in one night. He replied that it was good she was motivated. He studied her. He asked what she knew about Ryan's family business. She said just what everyone knows, that they run Whitmore Investments, have properties all over the city, and have been part of high society for generations. He told her she was wrong. Whitmore Investments is a shell. The real money came from Ryan's grandfather, who made his fortune in pharmaceutical patents. That money was supposed to sustain 3 generations, but Ryan's father gambled it away, trying to break into hotel development. They've been selling assets for 2 years, hiding it behind strategic restructuring narratives. Luca leaned back. He said that tonight, that information is going to become public knowledge. The business section of every major paper will run stories tomorrow morning about the Whitmore Empire's collapse. Elena's eyes widened. She asked how he knew that. He said it was because he was the one who sold the story to the papers. He'd had reporters investigating the Whitmores for months, waiting for the right time to publish. His expression was cold. He said that time is now. When she walks into that gala tonight, the Whitmores will be scrambling to contain a scandal that's about to destroy them, and she'll be on his arm, untouchable. She realized he planned this. It wasn't a question. He confirmed that even before yesterday, he planned to destroy the Whitmores. Running into her yesterday was a coincidence, but a useful coincidence. This way, she gets revenge and he gets a wife who has personal motivation to help him bury them. He tilted his head and asked if that bothered her. It should. But Elena found herself thinking about Ryan's voice in the cathedral, about Victoria Whitmore's pleased smile, about the whispers that had followed her as she ran. She quietly said no, it doesn't bother her at all. The rest of the day was a blur of preparation. Teresa assigned Elena a stylist who arrived with racks of evening gowns. A hairdresser and makeup artist followed. By 6 p.m., Elena barely recognized herself in the mirror. The gown was emerald green silk that fit like it had been made for her, with a neckline that was elegant without being revealing. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and the makeup was dramatic but sophisticated. Diamond earrings that Teresa brought in a locked case completed the look. Teresa supervised the final touches and said that Mr. Duca will meet her downstairs at 7. She reminded Elena to stand straight, make eye contact, and don't apologize for anything. She's a Duca now, so she should act like it. When Elena descended the stairs at 7 o'clock, Luca was waiting in the foyer. He'd changed into a tuxedo that made him look even more intimidating than usual. His eyes traveled over her appearance with that same assessing look. He said it was perfect. Not a compliment, an evaluation. He then said there was one more thing. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, a flawless emerald surrounded by diamonds set in platinum. It was breathtaking and probably worth more than Elena's entire former life. He told her to give him her hand. She extended her left hand, and he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, which shouldn't have surprised her at this point. Luca seemed like the type who got every detail right. He said it stays on at all times in public. It's a statement. She asked what kind of statement. He replied that it meant she was his and that he doesn't do anything halfway. He offered his arm and asked if she was ready. She wasn't ready at all, but she took his arm anyway, and they walked out to the car. The gala was being held at the Belmont Hotel, one of the city's most prestigious venues. As they pulled up to the entrance, Elena could see photographers and a red carpet. This wasn't just a charity event. It was a scene. As the driver opened the door, Luca told her to smile and to remember that she's exactly where she's supposed to be. They stepped out and immediately the camera started flashing. Elena felt Luca's hand at the small of her back, steady and grounding. They moved down the carpet, and she heard whispers around them. People were recognizing her, recognizing him, trying to piece together what this meant. Inside, the ballroom was filled with the same people who'd been at the cathedral yesterday. Elena recognized faces from the wedding. Ryan's business associates, his parents' friends. The society women who'd once looked at her like she was beneath them. Now those same people stared at her with confusion and something that looked like fear. Someone called her name. She turned. Ryan stood 5 feet away, his face pale. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. She calmly said, "Hello, Ryan." His eyes traveled from her face to Luca, then down to the ring on her finger. He asked what this was, what she was doing. She said it simply, that she was attending a charity gala with her husband, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She introduced Ryan Whitmore to Luca Duca. Luca extended his hand, and after a frozen moment, Ryan shook it. Elena could see the confusion in Ryan's eyes. He knew the Duca name, knew it meant power and danger, and he couldn't figure out how Elena had gone from humiliated bride to this man's wife in 24 hours. He said he didn't understand, looking at Elena. He started to say that yesterday she was. Elena interrupted, saying yesterday she was making a mistake. Today she corrected it. It turns out getting left at the altar was the best thing that could have happened to me. Ryan's face flushed. He tried to say, "Elena, you can't just." But she interrupted again, saying actually, she can. She smiled and it felt like putting on armor. She said if he'd excused them, her husband and she had people to see. She walked away on Luca's arm, leaving Ryan standing there looking like his world had just tilted off its axis. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her head high, her stride confident. Luca murmured, "Well done, you're a natural." They spent the next hour circulating through the gala. Luca introduced her to people, business associates, politicians, society figures, and Elena played her part perfectly. She smiled, made small talk, and didn't flinch when people asked pointed questions about her sudden marriage. She'd say with a mysterious smile that it was a whirlwind, and sometimes you just know. Then, at 9 p.m., everything changed. Elena was talking to a city councilwoman when she noticed a commotion near the entrance. Ryan's father, Charles Whitmore, was having an intense conversation with another man, his face red and angry. Victoria Whitmore looked stricken. Luca excused them from the councilwoman and guided Elena toward a quiet corner. He said it was starting. She asked what was starting. He told her to watch. Within minutes, the whispers spread through the ballroom like wildfire. Elena caught fragments of conversation. Whitmore Investments is bankrupt. Fraud investigation, selling everything. The Whitmores were being destroyed in real time, and everyone was watching it happen. Charles Whitmore stormed over to Luca, his face purple with rage. He accused Luca of doing this, of feeding those lies to the press. Luca corrected him calmly, saying he fed the truth to the press and there's a difference. Charles said he had no proof. Luca's voice was cold. He said he had financial records, testimony from his former accountants, and documentation of every fraudulent transaction his family has made in the last 3 years. He asked if Charles would like him to publish those too, or if he'd prefer to accept his losses quietly. Charles looked like he wanted to hit him. But something in Luca's expression, something dangerous and untouchable, made him step back instead. Charles said this wasn't over. Luca replied softly, "Yes, it is." The Whitmores left the gala 20 minutes later, and the whispers continued long after they were gone. Elena stood next to Luca. Watching the society, that had once embraced the Whitmores turn on them like sharks smelling blood. Luca asked quietly if she felt better. Elena thought about Ryan's face when he'd seen her, about the shock and confusion and dawning realization that she'd landed on her feet in a way he'd never expected. She said yes, she really did. They stayed until 11 o'clock, then left together. In the car ride home, Elena felt the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving her exhausted and a little shaky. Luca broke the silence, saying she did well tonight, better than he expected. She said thanks, she thinks. He said that tomorrow the papers will run the stories. By the end of the week, the Whitmores will be completely shut out of high society. Ryan will probably have to leave the city entirely to escape the scandal. He looked at her and asked if that's what she wanted. Elena admitted she didn't know what she wanted. She just knew she couldn't let them win. He paused, then asked if she got what she needed. He said the contract says they need to maintain separate bedrooms for appearances in the household, but they should discuss how they'll handle public affection. People will expect to see some level of intimacy between them. She asked how much intimacy. He said holding hands, standing close, the occasional kiss in public, nothing more unless she's comfortable with it. His tone was businesslike. He called this a performance, and said he won't ask for more than the contract specifies. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it just reminded her how transactional all of this was. She said okay quietly, that she could do that. When they arrived home, Elena went straight to her room. She took off the gown, removed the makeup, and stood in the bathroom in just a robe, staring at her reflection. Mrs. Duca, that's who she was now. Her phone, a new one that Luca had provided, buzzed with a text. She picked it up and saw it was from a number she didn't recognize. It was from her mother's new nurse at Brightwater. The nurse wanted to let her know her mom was settling in well and that she was asking about her. She wanted to know when Elena would like to visit. Elena's throat tightened. She'd been so caught up in everything, the wedding disaster, Luca's proposition, the gala, that she hadn't even gone to see her mother yet. She texted back that she'd be there tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Then she climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what came next. She'd gotten her revenge. She'd secured her mother's care. She'd married a man who promised security and protection in exchange for playing a role. But as she lay there in the dark in a bedroom that belonged to a stranger's house, wearing a ring that symbolized a contract instead of love, Elena couldn't help wondering what she'd actually gained and what it would cost her in the end. The morning light through the curtains felt wrong, too soft, too expensive. Elena woke disoriented, reaching for her phone before remembering none of this was her real life. Except it was now. The ring on her finger caught the light, emerald and diamonds throwing prismatic colors across white sheets that probably cost more than her old monthly rent. Her mother, she'd promised to visit at 9 o'clock. Elena showered quickly, then stood in front of the closet Teresa had filled with clothes she'd never have chosen for herself. Everything was designer, perfectly tailored, and completely foreign to who she'd been 3 days ago. She picked a simple navy dress and flats, trying to hold on to something that felt like her. Downstairs, Luca was in what Teresa called the breakfast room, which was still bigger than Elena's old living room. He was reading a newspaper with his coffee. He looked up when she entered and asked if she slept well. She said not really. There was no point in lying. She told him she was going to see her mother this morning. He said he knew, and Marco would drive her. He sat down the paper and said they needed to discuss something before she went. Elena poured herself coffee, needing the caffeine before whatever conversation this would be. She said all right. He explained the gala made waves exactly as planned. By this afternoon, 3 major clients will have pulled their accounts from what's left of Whitmore Investments. Charles Whitmore tried calling him at 6 this morning, but he didn't answer. Lucas's tone was matter-of-fact. He said Charles will try to negotiate, offer him something to make this stop, but he won't take it. The word good came out harder than Elena intended. He said he was telling her this because reporters will start digging into their marriage. They'll want the story, and some of them won't be kind about it. He studied her and asked if she could handle that. She said she handled last night. He countered that last night was a controlled environment, and the press is different. They'll dig into her past, her mother's situation, every detail of what happened at that cathedral. They'll try to paint her as a gold digger or an opportunist. Elena sat down her coffee cup. She said to let them. She knows what she is and what she's not. Anyone who believes tabloid headlines isn't worth her time anyway. Something flickered in Luca's expression. Approval, maybe. Or surprise. He said fair enough. But if any reporter approaches her directly, she shouldn't engage. She should refer them to his PR team. She asked if he had a PR team. He replied that he had teams for everything. He stood and said Marco was waiting out front. Her mother's nurse had been briefed on what to tell her. Just that Elena had married someone who can provide proper care for her, nothing more. He said to let her believe whatever version makes her comfortable. She commented that he thought of everything. He said he tries to. Luca paused at the doorway. He told Elena that her mother's care is guaranteed, regardless of how this marriage plays out. It's in the contract. She doesn't need to worry about it being used as leverage. It should have been comforting. Instead, it just reminded her that every kindness in this arrangement came with terms and conditions. Marco turned out to be the driver from yesterday. Quiet, professional, and built like he could break someone in half if needed. The drive to Brightwater Manor took 30 minutes through parts of the city Elena rarely saw, where the houses had gates and the streets had names instead of numbers. Brightwater itself looked more like a luxury hotel than a care facility. The lobby had marble floors, fresh flowers, and staff members who smiled like they actually meant it. The nurse who met Elena at reception was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes. She introduced herself as Sarah, her mother's primary nurse, and said she was Mrs. Duca. She told Elena her mother was doing wonderfully. They've adjusted her medications, and she's already responding well to the new physical therapy routine. Elena still wasn't used to hearing the name Mrs. Duca. She asked if she could see her. The nurse said of course she was in the sunroom. She gave a fair warning, saying her mother was very excited to meet her new husband. Sarah smiled apologetically. She had mentioned Elena got married, and her mother had been asking questions all morning. Elena's stomach tightened. She asked what the nurse told her. Just that she married someone who wants to make sure she gets the best care possible. Her mother filled in the rest herself. Sarah said, "You know how mothers are." They walked down a hallway that smelled like lavender instead of antiseptic, past rooms with actual artwork on the walls. Sarah stopped at a doorway where sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. Elena's mother sat in a chair by the window, looking healthier than she had in months. The stroke had left her right side weak. Her speech sometimes slurred, but now her color was better, and she was dressed in real clothes instead of a hospital gown. She called out Elena's name. Her mother's face lit up, though her smile was still slightly crooked. She called her baby girl and told her to come here. Elena crossed the room and knelt beside her mother's chair, taking her hand carefully. She said hi, Mom, and asked how she was feeling. Her mother said better, so much better. She said this place was. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. She didn't understand. She'd said the wedding was off, with Ryan, and now Sarah says she's married to someone else. Elena said it was complicated. Her mother asked if he was good to her, squeezing Elena's hand with surprising strength. This new husband. Elena thought about Luca's cold efficiency, his calculated revenge, the contract that bound them. She said he takes care of things, and he's making sure she gets proper treatment. But her mother asked if she loved him. The question hit like a physical blow. Elena opened her mouth, closed it, and tried to figure out how to answer without lying, but without telling the truth either. She finally said she married him, and that's what matters. Her mother studied her face with a too-sharp perception that came from years of reading her daughter's moods. She said Elena Marie Carter was a terrible liar and asked what was really going on. Elena carefully corrected her, saying it was Duca now. Actually, Elena Duca. She explained what was going on is that she made a choice that keeps her mother safe and taken care of. She asked if that could be enough. Her mother said not if she was miserable. Elena said she wasn't miserable, just adjusting. Squeezed her mother's hand and said Ryan would have been a mistake, and she saw that now. This was better. Her mother said she loved him. Elena replied that she loved who she thought he was, and it turns out she was wrong about that. The bitterness crept into her voice, despite her best efforts. She said he humiliated her at the altar in front of everyone because his family decided she wasn't good enough. Her mother's expression hardened. She asked what he did. Elena hadn't meant to say it, but the words came spilling out. The cathedral. Ryan's speech, running through the rain, Luca's offer. She left out the parts about the mafia and the calculated revenge, but the core story was there. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. She finally said this new husband, he was the one who destroyed the Whitmores. She saw it on the morning news. Their company was in ruins. Elena said yes. Her mother's voice was fierce despite the slur. She said good. They deserved it. She continued that this Luca offered her a way out when she had nothing. Elena said he offered her a business arrangement that benefits them both. Her mother asked if he takes care of her. Replied that in his way, yes. Her mother leaned back in her chair, looking tired suddenly. Then she said she won't ask if Elena loves him. She'll ask if she's safe with him. She asked if she was. Elena thought about the security at Luca's house, the way people at the gala had looked at him with fear and respect in equal measure. The cold certainty in his voice when he told Charles Whitmore it was over. She said yes, she was safe. Her mother said then, that's enough for now. She said love can come later, or it doesn't have to come at all as long as you have respect and security. Her mother explained that her father and they loved each other, but they were poor and struggling, and it wore them down. She told Elena not to romanticize suffering. If this man gives her stability and protection, that's worth something. It wasn't the response Elena had expected, but then her mother had always been practical about survival. They talked for another hour about smaller things. The facility, the physical therapy, the food that was apparently restaurant quality. Elena promised to visit twice a week and left her new phone number. As she was leaving, her mother called out, telling Elena to bring him next time. She wanted to meet the man who married her daughter. Elena promised she would, though the thought of Luca and her mother in the same room felt surreal. Marco was waiting by the car when she emerged. The drive back was quiet until Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Ryan. He said he saw her at the gala and they needed to talk. Elena stared at the message. Part of her wanted to delete it immediately, but curiosity won out. She replied that they had nothing to talk about. The response came seconds later. He pleaded to just meet him for coffee for one conversation. She should say no. She should block the number and forget Ryan Whitmore ever existed. But something made her hesitate. Maybe the need to hear what excuse he could possibly have. Maybe just the desire to see him squirm. She asked Marco if he could take her to Cafe Veritas on 5th Street. Marco glanced at her in the rearview mirror. He told her Mr. Duca was expecting her back for lunch. She told him to text Luca that she'd be late and that this won't take long. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but he changed direction without comment. 20 minutes later, they pulled up outside a coffee shop that Elena recognized. She and Ryan used to come here in the early days of their relationship, before his family got involved, before everything got complicated. Marco said he'd wait there. It wasn't a question. Elena found Ryan at a corner table looking terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, and he had dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept. He stood when she approached, then seemed to remember he had no right to courtesies anymore. As she sat down, he thanked her for coming. She told him he had 15 minutes to talk. Ryan flinched at her tone. He said he deserved that, and worse than that. He was so sorry for what happened at the cathedral. She asked which part. The public humiliation, the lies about her being a gold digger, or the part where he threw away 3 years like they meant nothing. He said all of it. He looked genuinely miserable. He didn't want to do it. His father insisted and said if he went through with the wedding, he'd cut him off completely. Their family had been hemorrhaging money for months, and he blamed her for it somehow. He said she was a distraction and a liability. Elena said so. He chose his family's money over her. He said he chose survival. He was weak and stupid, and he regretted every second. Ryan reached across the table, like he might take her hand, then thought better of it. He told Elena that this marriage to Luca Duca, she couldn't actually want that. He's dangerous. Everyone knows what he is. Elena said quietly that what he is someone who keeps his promises, unlike some people. Ryan said Luca was using her and asked if she couldn't see that. This marriage, showing up at the gala together, it's all part of whatever game he's playing to destroy his family. She said maybe, but at least he's honest about what he wants from her. She reminded him that he pretended to love her while planning to humiliate her in public. She stood and said they were done there. Ryan grabbed her wrist, not hard, but enough to stop her. He said he still loved her. He knew he didn't deserve another chance, but if she wanted out of this marriage, he could help her. They could start over, leave the city, go somewhere neither of their families could touch them. Elena looked at his hand on her wrist, then at his face. A week ago, this is what she would have wanted. Ryan choosing her over his family, offering to run away together like something from a romance novel. Now it just looked pathetic. She told him to let go of her. Her voice was cold. When he didn't, she repeated to let go. Ryan released her wrist, and Elena stepped back. She told him he didn't get to do this. He didn't get to destroy her, and then offer to save her when he realizes he made a mistake. She's not his backup plan. He said it's not like that. She replied that, yes, it is. He threw her away when it was convenient. And now that she's landed somewhere he can't touch, he wants her back. But she's not coming back, Ryan. Not ever. She walked out before he could respond, Marco falling into step beside her as they headed to the car. She was shaking from anger or adrenaline or something else she couldn't tell. Marco asked quietly if she was all right, Mrs. Duca. The name steadied her. Mrs. Duca, not Ryan's almost wife. Not the girl who got humiliated at the altar. Someone new. She said she was fine and to go home. Home? When had she started thinking of Luca's house as home? When they arrived, Teresa intercepted her in the foyer. She said Mr. Duca was in his office and asked to see her when she returned. Elena found Luca behind a massive desk working on a laptop. The office was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and windows overlooking the grounds. He looked up when she entered. He asked how her mother was. She said better, and that the facility was amazing. She thanked him for arranging it. He said that's what the contract says he'd do. He closed the laptop. He said Marco told him she made a stop for coffee with Ryan Whitmore. Of course Marco had told him. She explained he texted and asked to meet. She was curious what he'd say. He apologized, said he still loves her, offered to help her escape this marriage and run away with him. Elena crossed her arms and said she told him no. Luca studied her. He asked if she wanted to say yes. She said maybe a week ago, but now she shook her head. She called him pathetic. He chose his family's money over her. And now that she's with Luca, he suddenly wants to play hero. She's not interested in being anyone's redemption arc. Luca said good, and stood and came around the desk. Because starting tomorrow, things are going to get more complicated. His business partners want to meet her. There's a dinner Wednesday night, strictly formal, where she'll be introduced as his wife to people who matter in his world. She asked what kind of people. He replied the kind who don't ask questions and don't give second chances. His tone was serious. These dinners are part of how he maintains relationships and shows strength. Having a wife demonstrates stability, but these men will be watching her, evaluating whether she's an asset or a liability. Elena's stomach tightened. She asked what she needed to do. He told her to be polite. Don't ask about anyone's business. And if someone asks her a question she's not comfortable answering, she should redirect to him. He advised her to smile, but not too much. Make eye contact, but don't stare. She's presenting as someone confident in her place at his side. She said that was a lot of rules. He replied that was survival in his world. He moved closer. He needed to know she could handle this. Last night was high society playing dress-up. Wednesday is the real thing. These people are dangerous, and appearing weak in front of them is not an option. She said she won't appear weak. He said she says that now. Elena interrupted, reminding him that she stood at an altar, while the man she loved called her a gold digger in front of 200 people. She survived that. She can survive dinner with his business partners. Luca's expression shifted, something like respect flickering in his eyes. He said, all right, they'd start preparing tomorrow. There are specific people she needs to know about, specific topics to avoid, and she needs to learn how to read a room quickly. She asked why he was helping her with this, really helping, not just ordering her around. He was quiet for a moment. He said because if she fails in front of these people, it reflects on him. And because, he paused. Despite what she might think, he doesn't enjoy watching people drown. She's in this situation because of choices he made as much as choices she made. The least he can do is make sure she doesn't get eaten alive. It was more honesty than Elena had expected from him. She said, okay, then teach her what she needs to know. They spent the rest of the afternoon in his office while Luca briefed her on the men who'd be at Wednesday's dinner. Vincent Caruso, who ran construction and waste management, Anthony Rizzo, who handled gambling operations. Marco's father, Sal, who controlled the waterfront. Each man had a wife or girlfriend who'd be there, each one with her own power dynamics and unspoken rules. Luca said the wives are just as dangerous as the men. They're watching her to see if she's competition or if she's an idiot who'll cause problems for their husbands. Vincent's wife, Angela, runs the social hierarchy. If she accepts Elena, the others follow. She asked what happens if she doesn't. He said then she becomes a target. Nothing direct. They're too smart for that. But suddenly she'd be excluded from information, isolated at events, and vulnerable. He leaned back. He said Angela respects strength and hates weakness. Don't try to be her friend. Just show her she's not someone she can push around. Elena asked how she does that. He said by not backing down when she tests her, because she will test her. Luca's expression was serious. These women have spent years establishing their positions. Elena is new, unknown, and married to someone with significant power. They need to know where she fits. Elena absorbed this, trying not to feel overwhelmed. She asked if there was anything else she should know. He said yes. Don't drink too much. Don't laugh at jokes you don't understand. And if anyone asks about her previous engagement, be honest, but brief. The truth is always easier to remember than a lie. She clarified, the truth being that Ryan's family used her and threw her away when she was no longer convenient. He said exactly. These people understand betrayal. They respect survivors. He stood and said they were done for today. Teresa had arranged for dinner at 7 o'clock. He told her to try to rest before then, because she looked exhausted. Elena did feel exhausted. The emotional whiplash of the last few days was catching up to her. She returned to her room and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Ryan. He pleaded with her not to shut him out, saying he made a mistake and was trying to fix it. She deleted it without responding. That evening at dinner, Luca was back to being formal and distant, discussing business calls he needed to make and events they'd need to attend together. It felt like having dinner with a particularly polite stranger who happened to control her entire life. He said over dessert that there was a tailor coming tomorrow. She needed more formal wear for the dinner Wednesday. He told her to let Teresa know if there are specific styles she prefers. Elena pushed food around her plate and said she didn't really have preferences anymore. Everything's so different from what she used to wear that it doesn't feel like her choice anyway. Luca set down his fork. He said she could try making it her choice. This doesn't have to be something done to her. She can participate in shaping how she presents herself. As long as it fits within his requirements, she noted. He agreed yes, but within those requirements, she has freedom. He paused. He wasn't trying to erase who she was. He was trying to give her tools to survive who she is now. She said that was surprisingly thoughtful for a business arrangement. He replied he told her he doesn't enjoy watching people drown. He stood and told her to get some rest, as tomorrow was going to be a long day. Elena went to bed early but couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Wednesday dinner, about Angela Caruso and the other wives, about walking into a room where everyone was dangerous and no one would hesitate to use her weakness against her. Finally, around midnight, she gave up on sleep and wandered downstairs. The house was quiet, except for the sound of her bare feet on marble floors. She found herself outside Luca's office where light still spilled from under the door. She knocked softly. He told her to come in. Luca was still at his desk, reading something on his laptop. He looked up, surprised. He asked if she couldn't sleep. She said no. She kept thinking about Wednesday. He asked if she was having second thoughts. She said it was more like 50th thoughts. Elena sat in the chair across from his desk. She asked how he did this, walking into rooms full of dangerous people and never looking afraid. He asked who said he wasn't afraid. He closed the laptop top. He just doesn't let them see it. She said that wasn't helpful advice. He replied it was the only advice there is. He studied her. He said Elena had already survived the worst moment of her life. She stood at that altar and took everything Ryan threw at her, then walked away and made a choice that put her here. That takes more courage than most people have. She argued that was different. She was desperate. He said so. She should use that. Walk into Wednesday dinner, remembering that she's got nothing left to lose and everything to gain. These people can't take anything from her that hasn't already been taken. Elena thought about that. He was right. She'd already lost everything, her dignity, her future, with Ryan, her old life. What could Angela Caruso or anyone else possibly do to her that would be worse than standing at that altar? She said okay quietly, that she could work with that. He said good. Lucas stood and moved to the small bar in the corner of his office. He asked if she wanted a drink. She said she probably shouldn't. He said one drink won't hurt, and she looked like she could use it. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. He toasted to surviving. Elena raised her glass and said to surviving. The whiskey burned going down, but it was grounding. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Elena asked if she could ask him something. He said it depends on the question. She asked why her. She meant really, he could have found any number of women willing to marry him for money and security. Why pick someone he found in an alley having the worst day of her life? Lucas swirled his whiskey, considering. He said it was because she was desperate enough to say yes without asking too many questions, because she had personal motivation to help him destroy the Whitmores. And because, he paused, when he offered her that contract, she read every word before agreeing. Even soaking wet and heartbroken, she was smart enough to know what she was signing. That suggested she'd be smart enough to handle the rest of this. She said that was very calculated. He replied that was how he stayed alive. He met her eyes. But if she was asking whether he felt anything beyond strategic convenience, the answer is he doesn't let himself feel much of anything. It's safer that way. She said that sounded lonely. He said it was practical. He finished his whiskey and told her to go to bed, because tomorrow they had work to do. She went back upstairs, but his words stayed with her. Luca Duca had built a life where everything was calculated, where people were assets or liabilities, where feeling things was dangerous. And somehow Elena had become part of that life. Tuesday blurred past in preparations. The tailor came and went, taking measurements and showing Elena fabric samples that all looked expensive and foreign. Teresa drilled her on proper table settings and which topics were safe for small talk. Luca ran her through scenarios. What to say if someone asked about her background, how to deflect questions about his business, how to excuse herself gracefully if a conversation turned uncomfortable. By Tuesday night, Elena's head was spinning with rules and expectations and the growing weight of Wednesday's dinner. As they reviewed everything one last time, Luca said she was overthinking it. He told her to just be herself. She replied that it needed to be filtered through the requirements they've discussed. She said that was like saying, just breathe, but only with approved air. He almost smiled. He said she'd be fine and to trust him. She replied she didn't know him well enough to trust him. Then he said to trust the contract. He has just as much riding on Wednesday going well as she does. He stood and told her to get some rest, because they'd leave at 6 o'clock tomorrow. Elena tried. She really did. But sleep wouldn't come. Eventually she gave up and sat by the window, watching moonlight on the grounds, trying to prepare herself for walking into a room full of people who could destroy her with a word. She thought about her mother's question. Was she safe with him? The answer was yes, but safety came with a price, and tomorrow night she'd start paying it. Wednesday arrived with gray skies that matched Elena's mood. She'd barely slept. And when Teresa knocked at 7 o'clock with breakfast, Elena was already dressed in workout clothes, having spent the last hour doing yoga poses. She half remembered from a class she'd taken years ago. Anything to burn off the nervous energy. Teresa set down a tray and said Mr. Duca asked her to remind Elena the stylist arrives at 2, and that he'd like to see her in his office at noon. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. The breakfast sat untouched as she stared out the window, mentally rehearsing everything Luca had taught her. Don't back down from Angela Caruso. Don't ask about anyone's business. Don't drink too much. Don't appear weak. The list felt endless. At noon, she found Luca in his office with another man, older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too much. They both looked up when she entered. Luca gestured to the man and introduced him as Sal Rossi, Marco's father. He said Sal wanted to meet her before tonight. Sal stood and extended his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive. He called her Mrs. Duca and said he'd heard interesting things about her. Elena said she hoped nothing too terrible, trying to sound more confident than she felt. He replied that on the contrary, Luca told him she had spine. That was good. She'd need it tonight. Sal's eyes were sharp, assessing. He said his wife, Maria, will be there. She's direct, sometimes too direct. He told Elena not to take it personally. She said she'd try not to. He replied she'd probably fail because Maria specializes in getting under people's skin, but as long as she doesn't cry or run away, she'll be fine. He turned to Luca and said she'll do better than he expected, actually. After the older man left, Lucas said dryly that was high praise from Sal, because he usually hates everyone. Elena said that Sal had said she'll do, which wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement. Luca replied that in his world, it is. He leaned against his desk and asked how she was holding up. She said terrified but functional. She asked what if she messes this up? What if she says the wrong thing? He said then she'd recover and keep going. These people aren't looking for perfection, Elena. They're looking for weakness. As long as she doesn't give them that, she'll survive the night. She commented that he keeps saying survive, like this is a battlefield. He replied that it is, just a different kind of war. He checked his watch. He said the stylist will be there soon. He told her to let the stylist do her work, and he'd see her at 6 o'clock. They'll arrive together. The stylist turned out to be a woman named Claudia, who worked with the efficiency of someone who dressed dangerous men's wives before. She brought 3 different gowns, all in jewel tones, all cut to convey power rather than sex appeal. Claudia held up a deep burgundy dress against Elena and explained that Mr. Dukic wanted sophisticated and untouchable. These dinners aren't about being the prettiest woman in the room. They're about being the most formidable. Elena ended up in a midnight blue gown that hugged her frame without being revealing, with sleeves that went to her elbows and a neckline that was all business. Claudia paired it with the diamond earrings from the gala and a bracelet that looked antique and probably cost more than Elena wanted to know. Claudia decided her hair should be up, classic, nothing trendy. She wanted Elena to look like she belonged in old money, not like she was trying too hard. By the time Claudia finished, Elena barely recognized herself in the mirror. This woman looked cold, controlled, expensive. Nothing like the girl who'd run from a cathedral 5 days ago. Claudia said satisfaction that it was perfect. She looked like someone people should be afraid to underestimate. At 6, Elena descended the stairs to find Luca waiting in a black suit that probably costs more than most people's cars. He looked her over with that assessing gaze she was getting used to. He said, "Good, she looked exactly right." He offered his arm and asked if she was ready. She said no, but let's go anyway. The drive to the restaurant took 40 minutes, heading into a part of the city Elena didn't know well. The place itself looked unremarkable from the outside. A brownstone with no sign, no indication it was anything special. But when Luca opened the door, Elena understood immediately that this was the kind of establishment where reservations didn't exist, because the people who came here didn't need them. A man in a suit that screamed security nodded to Luca. He said, "Mr. Duca, they're waiting in the private room." Luca murmured, "Of course they are." He added quietly to Elena to stay close, not to wander off, and not to excuse herself without telling him first. They walked through a main dining room where conversation stopped as people noticed Luca. The private room in the back was intimate. A single round table set for 12 with wine already breathing and low lighting that created shadows and corners. 6 men stood talking, and 5 women sat at the table watching. Every eye turned to Elena. A man in his 50s stepped forward. Elena remembered from Luca's briefings that this was Vincent Caruso. He said about time, they were starting to think Luca had gotten cold feet about introducing them to this mysterious wife of his. Luca said smoothly that traffic was terrible. He introduced Elena to everyone. The introductions blurred together. Vincent and Angela Caruso, Anthony and Teresa Rizzo, Sal and Maria Rossi, and 3 other couples whose names Elena struggled to hold on to. But it was Angela who commanded attention. She was in her late 40s, still beautiful in a sharp-edged way, wearing a dress that costs more than some people's monthly salary. Her eyes traveled over Elena with the precision of a surgeon looking for the exact place to cut. Angela's voice carried across the room as she said so. Elena was the one who was supposed to marry Ryan Whitmore. She added that it must have been embarrassing. The other conversations stopped. Everyone was watching to see how Elena would respond. Elena said evenly that it was humiliating, but it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have married Luca. Angela's smile didn't reach her eyes. She said how convenient that he was waiting in the wings, almost like it was planned. Elena met Angela's gaze steadily and said nothing about that day was planned. She was just lucky that when everything fell apart, someone was there to offer her something better. She doesn't believe in wasting time on regret. Ryan made his choice, and she made hers, and now she's here. The silence stretched for a beat too long. Then Angela laughed, a sharp, genuine sound. She said Elena wasn't what she expected. She told her to come sit next to her. She wanted to hear how she managed to land Luca Duca in less than a week. The tension in the room eased slightly. Luca's hand pressed briefly against the small of Elena's back. Approval or relief, she couldn't tell. They took their seats, Elena between Angela and Maria Rossi, with Luca directly across from her. Dinner with small talk about business ventures Elena didn't understand and people she didn't know. She stayed quiet, listening, learning the dynamics. Vincent clearly led the group, but Luca held his own, never deferring, never backing down. Sal watched everything with shrewd eyes. Anthony Rizzo was louder, more volatile, making jokes that had an edge. The wives, meanwhile, conducted their own parallel conversation about charity events and country club politics, and whose daughter was getting married. Elena participated when asked direct questions, but mostly observed, trying to figure out the hierarchy Luca had warned her about. Suddenly, Maria Rossi's voice cut through the chatter. She said Luca told them Elena was a nurse before she got married and asked why she quit. The question felt loaded. Elena chose her words carefully. She explained that Ryan convinced her it wasn't appropriate for his wife to work, and it turned out to be bad advice from someone she shouldn't have trusted. Teresa Rizzo, who looked younger than the other wives and seemed nervous, asked if she would go back to nursing. Elena said she hadn't decided yet. Right now, she was focused on settling into her new life and making sure her mother gets the care she needs. Angela's tone sharpened as she asked if her mother was sick and what was wrong with her. Elena met Angela's eyes and said she had a stroke 2 years ago and needs full-time care. That's partly why Ryan's family dismissed her. They saw her mother as a liability, an expense they didn't want to take on. But Luca did. Angela looked across the table at Luca with something calculating in her expression.
Luca said simply that his wife's family is his responsibility.
And that's how it works. The men at the table nodded. This was language they understood. Family, loyalty, obligation. Elena realized Luca had just claimed her mother as part of his family, putting her under his protection in a way that meant something to these people. Halfway through the main course, Angela leaned close to Elena and said quietly that she was doing better than she expected. Most new wives either try too hard to fit in or cry in the bathroom by now. Elena asked if she should be insulted or flattered. Angela said both, probably. She took a sip of wine and offered some advice, one wife to another. She said these men, their husbands, are dangerous. They do things we don't ask about and probably don't want to know about. Their job is to maintain the appearance of normalcy, to run the social side of things, and to never ever show weakness in front of the other families. Elena asked why she was telling her this. Angela replied that it was because Luca has been alone too long, and having a wife changes the dynamics. It makes him more approachable, more human. That can be good or bad depending on how she handles it. Angela's eyes were serious now. She said, "Don't make him look weak. That's the only unforgivable sin in their world." Elena said she'd remember that. Angela said good, and told her to smile and pretend they were talking about something boring, like flower arrangements. Elena smiled, and Angela launched into a detailed description of centerpieces for an upcoming charity gala that Elena was apparently now expected to help organize. The other wives joined in, and Elena found herself being absorbed into their world, whether she wanted to be or not. The men's conversation turned to business, real estate deals and waterfront contracts and other things spoken in careful code. Elena caught Luca's eye once, and he gave her a subtle nod. She was doing okay. She hadn't failed yet. Then Anthony Rizzo, who'd been drinking steadily, said loudly, "So Luca, how does it feel knowing you got Ryan Whitmore's leftovers?" "That must sting even for you." The table went silent. Elena felt her face flush, but before she could respond, Luca's voice cut across the room like ice. He told Anthony to be careful. He was talking about his wife. Anthony said he was just saying she was supposed to marry someone else. Luca replied that she was supposed to marry an idiot who didn't know what he had, but he does. Luca's tone was pleasant, but there was steel underneath, and if Anthony valued their friendship, he wouldn't finish that sentence. Anthony raised his hands in mock surrender. He said no offense was meant. He was just curious how it all went down so fast. Luca's eyes stayed on Anthony. He said it went down fast because he doesn't waste time when he sees something he wants. Elena's past with Whitmore is irrelevant. What matters is she's his now, and anyone who disrespects her disrespects him. He asked if they're clear. Anthony nodded quickly. Crystal clear. He apologized to Elena, saying no disrespect was intended. Elena said none was taken, though her heart was racing. She'd just watched Luca defend her honor in a room full of dangerous men, and the casual way he'd done it, the certainty in his voice when he said she was his, sent something complicated through her chest. Vincent Caruso cleared his throat. He said on that note, "Let's talk about the waterfront project." He asked Sal if he had the permits arranged. The conversation moved on, but Elena was still processing what had just happened. Luca had claimed her publicly and unmistakably, not because he loved her. They both knew this was a business arrangement, but because in his world, what was his was protected. No exceptions. After dinner, the group moved to a sitting area for coffee and dessert. The women clustered together while the men talked business in the corner. Angela poured Elena an espresso and said that was well played. Elena asked what was, not reacting when Anthony was an ass. Angela said it was letting Luca handle it. She stirred sugar into her coffee. Some new wives would have gotten defensive, tried to defend themselves. That would have looked weak. Elena stayed quiet and let her husband deal with it. That was smart. Elena said she didn't really have a choice. She was frozen. Angela replied that frozen and smart looked the same from the outside. She studied Elena and said she was going to be fine in this world. She had the right instincts. Just don't let anyone see her doubt herself. Maria Rossi joined them, setting down her coffee with a loud clink. She said her son says Elena is living at Luca's estate and asked how that was going, because he can be intense. Elena admitted it was an adjustment, and everything's different from what she's used to. Teresa Rizzo said quietly that marriage to any of these men is an adjustment. She looked tired. She said you get used to it eventually, or you learn to pretend you are, which is close enough. Elena muttered that was cheerful. Maria leaned back and said it was realistic. She explained that these men aren't like normal husbands. They disappear for days sometimes, come home with blood on their clothes they won't explain, and make phone calls they won't let you hear. You learn not to ask questions, not to push, not to expect normal, but you stay because leaving isn't an option, and because, despite everything, there are benefits. Maria gestured around the room. Security, money, protection. Her mother's being taken care of in the best facility in the city, right? That doesn't happen if you're married to some accountant working 9 to 5. Angela shot Maria a look, saying she was scaring her. Maria said she was being honest. It was better she knows now than figures it out the hard way. Maria turned to Elena and said she made her choice when she married him, and now she has to live with it. That's how this works. The bluntness was jarring, but Elena appreciated it more than Angela's careful diplomacy. At least Maria was telling her the truth. This life came with costs. Elena was only beginning to understand. The evening wound down around 11 o'clock. As people started leaving, Vincent pulled Luca aside for a conversation that looked serious. Elena waited by the door with Angela. Angela observed that he was getting her involved in his world faster than most. That's either good or bad, depending on how you look at it. Elena asked which it was. Angela said it was too early to tell, but Angela's voice dropped. She told Elena that if she ever needs anything, advice, help, someone who understands what this life is like, she should call her. She was serious. The wives, they look out for each other because no one else will. She pressed a business card into Elena's hand, then swept out with Vincent. The other couples followed until it was just Lena and Luca standing in the entryway. Luca said she survived and asked how she felt. She said exhausted, confused, like she just got inducted into something she still doesn't fully understand. He said that was accurate. He guided her to the car where Marco was waiting. But she did well. Angela doesn't offer her number to just anyone, and Vincent seemed impressed. That's as good as tonight could have gone. In the car, Elena kicked off her heels and leaned her head back against the leather seat. She mentioned Anthony called her his leftovers. Luca's voice was flat. He said Anthony's an idiot who drinks too much and to ignore him. She pointed out that he didn't ignore him. He defended her. He said it was because she's his wife. That means something in their world, even if the marriage itself is a contract. He looked at her. He told her before that he keeps his promises. Part of this arrangement is that she's under his protection. That includes her reputation. She said, "Thank you." It felt inadequate, but Elena didn't know what else to say. They drove in silence until Luca's phone rang. He answered, his expression darkening as he listened. He asked when and how bad. He said, "All right, he'll handle it." He told the person on the phone to keep him there until he arrives. He ended the call and leaned forward. He told Marco to change plans and take them to the warehouse on Pier 7. Elena asked if he was going now, at almost midnight. He replied it was a problem that can't wait. Luca's tone had shifted, colder now, all business. He'll have Marco take her home after he deals with this. She asked what kind of problem. He replied it was the kind she doesn't need to know about. He saw her expression and sighed. He said, "Elena, this is what Maria was talking about. There are parts of his life she's better off not understanding." But she asked if she was supposed to just accept that he disappears to warehouses at midnight and not ask questions. He said, yes, that's exactly what she's supposed to do. His voice was firm. This isn't negotiable. The car pulled up to a dark building on the waterfront. Luca got out, then paused at the door. He told Marco to take Mrs. Duca home and not to leave her until she's inside safely. Elena grabbed his arm before he could close the door and told him to wait and be careful. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. He said he'll be fine, this is just business. Then he was gone, walking into the warehouse with two men who'd appeared from the shadows. Marco pulled away from the curb and Elena watched the building disappear behind them. She asked Marco if he was really going to be okay. Marco replied that Mr. Duca can handle himself. He's been doing this a long time, but that didn't answer whether he'd be safe. Elena spent the drive home imagining worst-case scenarios, then got angry at herself for caring. This was a business arrangement. Luca had made that clear from the beginning. What he did and where he went wasn't supposed to matter to her beyond how it affected their contract. Except it did matter. She'd watched him defend her tonight. Watched him claim her as his in front of dangerous men. Watched him walk into that warehouse without hesitation. And despite everything, despite the contract and the cold efficiency and the fact that this marriage was fake, she'd felt something when he'd said she was his. Something that scared her more than Angela Caruso or Anthony Rizzo or any of the dangerous people she'd met tonight. She was starting to care about Luca Duca. Back at the house, Teresa was waiting up. She said Mr. Duca called and said Elena did wonderfully tonight and to make sure she had everything she needed. Elena said she was fine, just tired. She headed for the stairs. She asked if Teresa knew when he'll be back. Teresa said, "No, ma'am. He doesn't usually share that information." Elena went to her room and changed out of the gown, but she couldn't settle. She kept checking her phone, listening for the sound of a car in the driveway, trying to distract herself with television she wasn't really watching. At 2 a.m., she heard the front door open. She was out of bed before she'd consciously decided to move, padding down the hallway in bare feet and pajamas. Luca was in the foyer taking off his jacket. There was blood on his shirt. She asked if he was hurt. The words came out sharper than she intended. He looked up, surprised to see her. He said it's not his, and told her to go back to bed. She asked whose blood it was. He said it was someone who made bad choices. He started walking toward his wing of the house. He told her this doesn't concern her. She followed him and said he can't just come home covered in blood and tell her it doesn't concern her. She asked what happened at that warehouse. Luca stopped and turned. His eyes were cold, harder than she'd ever seen them. He asked if she really wanted to know, because once he tells her, she can't unhear it. She can't pretend she doesn't know what he's capable of. Elena hesitated. Maria's words came back to her. You learn not to ask questions, not to push, not to expect normal. This was the moment where she could step back, could choose ignorance, and the comfortable distance that came with it. But she'd never been good at taking the safe option. She told him to tell her. Lucas studied her for a long moment, then walked into his office. Elena followed. He poured himself a drink, downed it in one swallow, and turned to face her. The problem was a man named Danny Cortez. He worked for Anthony Rizzo, handling collections for the gambling operations. It turns out Danny was skimming money, about $50,000 over the last 6 months. Anthony wanted him dealt with. She asked how he was dealt with. He wanted him dead. It's the standard punishment for theft in their world. Luca's voice was matter-of-fact, but he negotiated a different solution. Danny paid back what he stole, plus interest. And Luca broke his left hand as a reminder not to steal again. He'll live, but he won't work in this business anymore. Elena felt sick. She repeated that he broke his hand. He said he could have killed him. That was the expectation. Instead, he showed mercy, which Danny will remember, and which Anthony can accept without looking weak. Luca set down his glass. He told Elena that's what he does. He hurts people. Sometimes he kills them. He operates in a world where violence is currency and reputation is everything. And she's married to him, which means she's connected to that world, whether she likes it or not. She asked why he was telling her this. He said because she asked and because she needs to understand what she's really of. He moved closer. He's not a good man. He's not someone she should care about or worry about when he leaves at midnight. He's someone who does terrible things to survive in a terrible world. And the only reason she's safe is because he's decided she is. He asked if that was supposed to make her feel better. He said it was supposed to make her smart. His eyes were intense. He told her to go back to bed, stop waiting up for him, stop worrying about whose blood is on his clothes, and stop asking questions she doesn't want the answers to. He walked past her, heading for what she assumed was his bedroom. Elena stood in his office, shaking slightly, staring at the glass he'd left on the desk. She should be horrified. She should be terrified. She should be planning how to get out of this contract and away from Luca Duca and this world of violence and danger. Instead, all she could think about was how tired he'd looked when he told her he'd shown mercy. How the blood on his shirt was there because he'd chosen not to kill someone. How in a world where violence was expected, he'd negotiated a different solution. Elena went back upstairs, but she didn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about Luca, about the contract between them, about the fact that despite everything he'd just revealed, she still wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't afraid of him. Maybe, but when she remembered the way he'd defended her at dinner, the way he'd made sure her mother was cared for, the way he'd walked her through preparing for her, tonight she couldn't reconcile that man with the one who broke bones in warehouses. Or maybe they were the same man, and that was the real problem. Maybe Luca Duca was exactly as complex and contradictory as he appeared, and Elena was starting to care about him anyway. The realization kept her awake until dawn. The next morning came too early. Elena dragged herself out of bed after maybe 3 hours of restless sleep. Images of blood-stained shirts and broken hands playing on repeat every time she closed her eyes, She found Luca already in the breakfast room looking completely refreshed, reading the newspaper like he hadn't spent half the night breaking someone's hand in a warehouse. Without looking up, he said she looked terrible. She replied she didn't sleep well. He folded the paper and studied her, asking if it was because of what he told her last night. He warned her that she didn't want to know. She said he was right, she didn't. Elena poured coffee with hands that weren't quite steady, but now she does know, and she can't unknow it. So here they are. He echoed. Here we are. He asked if she was going to have a breakdown and leave. Because if she was, he needed to know now so he could start damage control. The casual way he said it stung more than it should have. She said she's not leaving. She signed a contract, and her mother needs that facility he's paying for. She's just adjusting. He said good, because they have an event tonight, smaller than the dinner, just cocktails with some of Vincent's business associates. She needs to be functional. She said she was fine. He replied she said she was adjusting, and that's not the same thing. Luca stood and walked over to her, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. He said, Elena, if she can't handle this, she should tell him now. He can work around it, find other arrangements for her mother, release her from the contract. But he needs to know she's not going to fall apart when things get difficult. She jerked her chin away from his hand. She reminded him she stood at an altar and got destroyed in front of 200 people. She married a stranger. The next day, she walked into a room full of criminals and held her own. She thinks she can handle knowing her husband isn't a saint. He replied her husband is a lot worse than not a saint. She said she was aware. Elena took a long drink of coffee, needing the burn. She asked what time they need to leave tonight. Luca watched her for another moment, then seemed satisfied that she wasn't about to crack. He said 7. She should wear something less formal than the dinner. This is cocktails, not a sit-down meal. And Elena, if she needs to talk to someone about what she's feeling, she shouldn't talk to him. She should call Angela or Maria. They understand this life better than he does. She asked if it was because he doesn't feel anything. He replied, it was because he stopped letting himself feel things a long time ago. He picked up his newspaper and said it's easier that way. Elena spent the morning trying to distract herself with mundane tasks, calling her mother's facility to check in, responding to texts from the nurses, organizing the clothes Teresa had arranged in her closet. But her mind kept drifting back to Luca, to the blood on his shirt, to the cold efficiency in his voice when he described breaking Danny Cortez's hand. Around noon, her phone rang. It was Angela Caruso. Angela asked without preamble how she was holding up after last night. Elena said she was fine, tired, but fine. Angela said she was a terrible liar. Maria had texted her this morning and said Luca came home late with that look he gets when he's had to handle something messy. She asked if he told her about it. Elena hesitated, then said some of it. Angela's voice was knowing. She said now Elena was spiraling, wondering what kind of man she's married and what that makes her for staying. She asked if she was close. Elena said uncomfortably close. Angela said here's what she learned when she married Vincent 23 years ago. You can't survive in this world if you think about it too much. You accept that your husband does things you'd rather not know about. You focus on the parts of your life you can control, and you build your own space within the marriage where you're safe. Elena said that sounded like giving up. Angela said it sounded like surviving. And there's a difference. She paused. She told Elena she was having lunch at Club Meridian tomorrow at 1, and that she should join her. They'll talk about things that aren't their husband's business dealings. Elena said she didn't know if she should. Angela said she wasn't asking. 1 o'clock, Club Meridian. Marco knows where it is. Angela hung up before Elena could argue. Elena stared at her phone, then texted Luca. She told him Angela invited her to lunch tomorrow and asked if that was okay. His response came immediately. He said yes, it was good for her to build relationships with the other wives, and to take Marco with her. So, she was being managed again, pushed toward relationships that served Luca's purposes. Elena tried to feel angry about it, but couldn't muster the energy. Maybe Angela was right. Maybe survival meant focusing on what she could control and letting go of the rest. That evening's cocktail party was at a penthouse in the financial district, hosted by one of Vincent's business associates named Richard Chen. The space was all glass and steel with views of the city that would have been breathtaking if Elena hadn't been so exhausted. As they entered, Luca murmured to stay by his side. This crowd was different from the dinner, more ambitious, less established. They'll be looking for ways to use her to get to him. She said that was reassuring. He told her to just keep her guard up. The party was smaller than the gala, but more intense. Everyone seemed to be sizing everyone else up, looking for advantages and weaknesses. Elena recognized a few faces from the dinner, but most were strangers. Luca introduced her to a parade of people whose names she immediately forgot, all while keeping a possessive hand at the small of her back. A woman in a red dress who introduced herself as Melissa Chen, Richard's wife, said so. She was the infamous Elena Duca, the girl who went from jilted bride to Luca's wife in 24 hours. She said that was quite a story. Elena said neutrally that life moves fast sometimes. Melissa said she'll say, Ryan Whitmore must be kicking himself. She leaned in conspiratorially. Between them, she never liked the Whitmores. They were too pretentious, always acting like they were better than everyone else. It's nice to see them taken down a peg. The man next to her, Richard Chen himself, said it was several pegs from what he heard. Their company's basically defunct. They're selling their North Shore property, and Ryan's father is under investigation for fraud. Someone really did a number on them. His eyes flicked to Luca, who showed no reaction. Elena said carefully that karma's interesting that way. Sometimes people get exactly what they deserve. Richard laughed. He said that was diplomatic and he liked that. He told Luca his wife is smarter than she looks. Luca said coolly that she's smarter than most people in this room, and that's why he married her. The conversation moved on, but Elena felt the weight of Richard's assessment. These people were always watching, always measuring, always looking for an angle. It was exhausting. Halfway through the evening, Elena excused herself to find the bathroom. She was washing her hands when the door opened and a woman walked in. She was young, maybe 25, wearing a dress that was trying too hard. She asked if Elena was Luca's new wife. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. Elena said that's right. The woman said her name was Sophia, and she used to date Luca about a year ago. She pulled out lipstick and reapplied it slowly. She said he probably didn't mention her. Elena dried her hands, wanting to leave, but trapped by politeness. She said he didn't. Sophia said they were together for 6 months. He never talked about marriage, then said he wasn't the type to settle down. She guessed he changed his mind. Sophia's tone was light, but there was something sharp underneath. Or maybe Elena just caught him at the right moment after that whole situation with the Whitmores made her available. Elena said she should get back. Sophia said she wasn't trying to cause trouble. She just thinks it's funny, how fast he moved. Almost like he'd been watching her before the wedding fell apart, waiting for his chance. Sophia capped her lipstick, but maybe she was just being paranoid. Luca does love a good opportunity when he sees one. She left before Elena could respond. Elena stood there, her reflection staring back at her in the mirror, Sophia's words echoing in her head. Had Luca been watching her before the cathedral disaster? Had their encounter in that alley been less coincidence and more calculation than he'd admitted? When she returned to the party, Luca noticed immediately. He asked what was wrong. She said nothing, just tired. He said she was lying. He steered her to a quiet corner and asked what happened. She said she met Sophia, his ex-girlfriend, apparently. Luca's expression darkened. He asked what she said to her. Elena told him that they dated, that he never wanted to get married, and that maybe he'd been watching her before Ryan called off the wedding. Elena crossed her arms and asked if any of that was true. He said he dated Sophia briefly. It wasn't serious, and he ended it 6 months ago. As for the rest, he stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. He knew who she was before they met in that alley. He'd researched the Whitmore family while planning how to destroy them, which meant he knew about Ryan's engagement. When he saw the wedding announcement, he saw her picture. Elena's stomach dropped. So, he did plan it, the whole thing? He said no, he didn't plan for Ryan to humiliate her at the altar. That was his family's decision, not his. He didn't plan to find her in that alley. But when he did, when she was desperate and vulnerable and had nowhere else to turn, he saw an opportunity and he took it. His voice was steady, unapologetic. He said that's what he does, Elena. He sees opportunities and he exploits them. She asked if she was just another business move to him. He replied she was a strategic advantage that also happens to benefit her. That's not the same as using her. He grabbed her arm when she started to turn away. He told her not to walk away from him in the middle of a party because people are watching. She replied that maybe he should have thought about that before admitting he's been manipulating her from the start. He said he hadn't been manipulating her. He's been honest about what this marriage is, a transaction that serves them both. The fact that he knew who she was before they met doesn't change the terms of their contract or the benefits she's receiving. His grip tightened slightly. He told her to smile and act like they're having a pleasant conversation because Richard Chen is watching and he needs him to see a united front. Elena wanted to scream, wanted to walk out of this party and this marriage and this whole twisted situation. But Angela's words came back to her. You accept that your husband does things you'd rather not know about. You focus on the parts of your life you can control, and you build your own space within the marriage where you're safe. She smiled. It felt like putting on armor made of glass. Luca murmured better and said they'd talk about this at home. For now, just get through the next hour. That hour stretched like torture. Elena smiled and made small talk and played the role of Luca's devoted wife while fury burned under her skin. Sophia watched from across the room with a satisfied expression. Richard Chen observed everything with calculating eyes, and Luca kept his hand on her back, a constant reminder that she was his, whether she liked it or not. The drive home was silent except for the sound of rain hitting the car windows. Elena stared out at the city, feeling like she'd been played from the beginning. Every kindness, every protection, every moment where she'd thought maybe Luca was more than just a cold businessman, all of it was calculated. Luca finally said to say what she needed to say. She accused him of using her. He corrected her, saying he offered her a deal when she had no other options, and that's not the same thing. She said he researched her. He knew about Ryan, knew about her mother, knew everything before he ever spoke to her. Elena turned to face him. That wasn't coincidence, Luca. That was stalking. He said it was due diligence. He researches everyone connected to the people he's planning to destroy. It's how he stays ahead. He met her eyes. Yes, he knew who she was. Yes, he'd seen her picture. But he wasn't planning to approach her until he saw her in that alley, broken and desperate. Then he made a decision to offer her a way out that also served his purposes. He asked if she would have preferred he left her there to figure things out on her own. She said she would have preferred he be honest about it from the start. He asked if she would have trusted him enough to get in his car, if he told her he had been researching the Whitmores and knew everything about her life before they met. The honest answer was no. She probably would have run, which meant Luca's deception had been necessary to get her to accept his offer. Elena said quietly that she hates that he's right. He said he's usually right and she'll get used to it. He looked back out the window. He explained that Sophia approached her tonight to cause trouble. She's angry he ended things and has been trying to undermine him for months. He told Elena not to let her get in her head. She replied too late. He told her to get her out of it then. She doesn't matter, Elena. What matters is that their arrangement works, that they both benefit, and that they present a united front to the people who are watching them. He paused. What also matters is that despite how this started, he has kept every promise he made to her. Her mother is being cared for, her debts are cleared, she has security and resources she didn't have before. Those are facts, regardless of how they met. Elena wanted to argue, but he was right again. Whatever Luca's methods, whatever his motivations, he had delivered on everything he'd promised. She was better off now than she'd been standing in that alley, even if it meant being married to a man who saw her as a strategic advantage. At home, Elena went straight to her room. She changed into pajamas and was about to climb into bed when there was a knock on her door. It was Luca. He asked if he could come in. She said it was his house. He opened the door but stayed in the threshold. He came to tell her something, the truth about why he approached her that day. She said he already told her she was an opportunity. He said she was, but that's not the whole story. He leaned against the doorframe. The night before her wedding, he was finalizing plans to leak the Whitmore scandal. He knew it would destroy Ryan's father, probably force the family to leave the city. He felt good about it, righteous even. Then he saw her wedding announcement in the paper with her picture, and he thought about how she'd be collateral damage in his revenge. Elena sat up straighter and asked what he meant. He meant he almost called off the whole thing because he didn't want to hurt an innocent person. She wasn't part of the Whitmore corruption. She was just someone who'd made the mistake of falling for their son. Luca's expression was unreadable. Then Ryan humiliated her at the altar, and he realized he could give her a way out while still destroying them. It solved his conscience problem and his need for a wife at the same time. She asked about his conscience problem. He said he's not completely heartless, despite what she might think. He just doesn't let people interfere with business usually. He straightened up. But you should know that he does feel things, Elena. He just doesn't show them because showing them is dangerous. And one of the things he felt when he saw her in that alley was guilt. Because he'd been planning to ruin the family she was about to marry into, and he knew that would hurt her too. So this whole marriage was his way of making himself feel better about destroying the Whitmores, he said partly. It was also practical and beneficial, and everything else he'd told her. But yes, there's a piece of him that felt like he owed her something for the pain his plans would cause. He pushed off from the doorframe and told her to take that however she wants. He just thought she should know. He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him. Elena sat there in the dark, trying to process this new information. Luca Duca, the man who broke bones in warehouses and operated in a world of violence and danger, had almost canceled his revenge plan because he didn't want to hurt her. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. But it did explain why he'd approached her, why he'd offered the contract, why he kept his promises with such careful precision. Luca was trying to balance the scales, to give back something equivalent to what his revenge had taken away. Elena didn't know if that made him better or worse than she'd thought. Maybe it just made him human, complicated, and contradictory like everyone else. She finally fell asleep around 3 a.m., exhausted from trying to figure out a man who didn't want to be figured out. The next day, Marco drove her to Club Meridian for lunch with Angela. The club was exactly what Elena expected. Old money, quiet wealth, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and newcomers were scrutinized. Angela was already seated at a corner table wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Elena's former monthly salary. Angela said she made it, and that she wasn't sure she would. Elena sat down and explained that Luca said it was good for her to build relationships with the other wives, so here she was, being managed. Angela said that's marriage to men like theirs. Everything is strategy, even friendships. She poured water from a crystal pitcher, but that doesn't mean the friendships can't be real, too. She asked how Elena was holding up. Elena said she was tired of that question. Angela said she'd ask a different one then. Has Luca shown her the worst of what he is yet? Or is she still in the honeymoon phase where he pretends to be civilized? Elena almost laughed. She said he showed her last night, actually. His ex-girlfriend cornered her in the bathroom to tell her he'd been stalking her before they met. Angela's eyebrows rose. Sofia Moriarty, tall brunette, desperately wants to be relevant again. Elena said that's the one. Angela said she's full of it. Luca didn't stalk her. He researched the Whitmores, which is different. And Sophia's bitter because Luca dumped her when she started asking too many questions about his business. Angela leaned forward. She said to let her tell her something about Luca Duca. He's cold, he's calculating, and he does terrible things without blinking. But he's also one of the few men in their world who has actual principles. He won't involve innocence if he can help it. He keeps his word even when it's inconvenient, and he takes care of the people under his protection. Elena said she sounded like she admired him. Angela said she respects him. There's a difference. She picked up her menu. Vincent has known Luca for 15 years, and in all that time, Luca has never betrayed a confidence or broken a deal. That's rare in their world. Most men would sell out their own mothers for the right price. But Elena noted he still hurts people. He still does violent, terrible things. Angela said yes, and so does Vincent and Anthony and every other man in their world. The question isn't whether your husband is violent. They all are. The question is whether he's violent with purpose or just violent because he can be. Luca is the former. He doesn't hurt people for fun. The waiter arrived and they ordered. Elena got a salad she probably wouldn't eat, and Angela ordered salmon with the ease of someone who'd been doing this her entire adult life. When the waiter left, Elena asked Angela how she did it, how she accepted what Vincent is and built a life anyway. She said she separated the man from the work. At home, Vincent is her husband. He takes out the trash, argues with her about stupid things, and watches bad TV. Outside their house, he's someone else, someone who does things she doesn't ask about. She focuses on the man she lives with and tries not to think too much about the other version. Angela's expression softened slightly. She said it's not perfect. There are nights she can't sleep because she knows he's out there doing something terrible. But then she thinks about the alternative, leaving him, losing everything, starting over with nothing, and she stays. Elena said that sounds like being trapped. Angela replied that it sounds like making a choice and living with it. We all make choices, Elena. Some of them are bad, some are good. Most are somewhere in between. She chose to marry Luca when she had no other options. Now she's choosing to stay even though she knows what he is. She told Elena to own that choice and not to let anyone make her feel guilty about it. Their food arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. The charity gala Angela was organizing, the renovation she was planning for her house, the vacation she and Vincent were taking next month. It was almost normal, except for the security guards Elena had noticed stationed near the exits, and the way everyone in the club seemed aware of who Angela was. As they finished lunch, Elena asked if she could ask her something. She asked if she loved Vincent. Angela was quiet for a moment. She said she did once, madly, stupidly, the way you love someone when you're young and think love conquers everything. Now, she considered, she loves the life they've built, the stability they have, the respect they've earned together. Whether that's the same as loving him, she honestly doesn't know anymore, but it's enough. Elena said that was sad. Angela replied that it was realistic. She signaled for the check. She said Elena was still new to this world. She still thinks in terms of romance and grand gestures and true love. She told her to give it time. She'll learn that survival and partnership are worth more than passion. Elena said she hoped she was wrong. Angela said so did she, actually. She signed the check and stood. But she's been in this world long enough to know how it usually goes. She told Elena to come on. She'll walk her out. In the parking lot, Angela paused before getting into her car. She said one more thing. If Luca ever crosses the line with Elena, if he hurts her, or threatens her, or makes her genuinely afraid, she should call her. She knows people who can help, who can get her out safely. She was serious about that. Elena asked why she would help her against someone Vincent does business with. Angela replied it was because she was her, once, young, new to this world, trying to figure out how to survive it. No one helped her, and she's regretted that for 20 years. She won't make the same mistake with Elena. Angela got into her car. She told Elena to be smart and not to fall in love with Luca Ducasa. That's the one thing that will destroy her faster than anything else in this world. The drive home gave Elena too much time to think about Angela's warning, about Luca's confession last night, about the fact that despite everything, the violence, the manipulation, the cold calculation, Elena was starting to understand him, and understanding was dangerous. Understanding led to sympathy, which led to caring, which led to exactly what Angela had warned her against. At home, Teresa intercepted her in the foyer. She said Mr. Duca was in his office and asked to see her when she returned. Elena found him at his desk as usual, but this time he was on the phone, his voice low and tense. He gestured for her to sit, then ended the call. She asked if there was a problem. He said it was nothing she needed to worry about. He asked how lunch with Angela was. She said it was enlightening, and that Angela told her not to fall in love with him. Luca's expression didn't change. He said that was smart advice. Elena said she also said he was one of the few men in his world with actual principles. She asked if Angela was being generous or honest. Elena leaned forward. She asked Luca why he really married her. Not the strategic reasons, not the revenge angle, the real reason. He was quiet for a long time, studying her face like he was trying to decide how much truth to give her. Finally, he said it was because he was tired of being alone. He was tired of relationships that are transactions, of never trusting anyone, of going home to an empty house after doing terrible things. When he saw her in that alley, he saw someone who understood loss and desperation and survival. He thought maybe they could build something real out of all that shared damage. She asked if that was why he structured it as a business deal. He said because he doesn't know how to do anything else. This is who he is, Elena. Someone who turns everything into a transaction because it's safer than risking actual feelings. He stood and came around the desk. She asked for the truth, and that's it. He married her because he hoped that maybe eventually this fake marriage could become something less fake. But he didn't tell her that because he didn't want her to feel pressured into something she never signed up for. Elena's breath caught. This was the most honest Luca had ever been with her, and it changed everything. He wasn't just a cold businessman using her for strategic advantage. He was someone lonely and damaged, trying to build connection the only way he knew how, she said quietly. What if she told him it's working? What if she told him that, despite the contract and the calculation and everything else, she's starting to care about him anyway? Then he said he'd tell her to be careful, because caring about him is dangerous and he doesn't want to be responsible for hurting her more than she's already been hurt. He reached out and touched her face gently. He said she deserved better than this, Elena. Better than him? Better than this world. Better than a marriage that started as a business deal. She said maybe she doesn't want better. Maybe she just wants real. She stood, closing the distance between them. She reminded him. He said he wanted this to become something less fake. So, she said, let's start now. No more contracts, no more transactions. Just two people trying to figure out if they can actually make this work. He said that was a terrible idea. She said probably, but she's done playing it safe. Safe got her humiliated at an altar. Risky got her here with him, with a chance at something that might actually matter. She took his hand. So she asked, what did he say? Did he want to try being married for real? He looked at their joined hands, then at her face, something shifting in his expression. He said she was going to regret this. She replied maybe, but at least she'll regret it honestly. Luca pulled her closer, and for the first time since they'd met, he kissed her like he meant it. Not for show, not for appearances, but because he wanted to. Elena kissed him back and felt the careful walls she'd been building around her heart start to crumble. This was dangerous. Angela had warned her. Maria had warned her. Even Luca had warned her. But Elena had spent her whole life playing it safe, and safe had gotten her nowhere. So she chose dangerous instead and prayed it would be worth it. When Elena woke the next morning, Luca's side of the bed was empty. Not the guest room anymore. Not separate wings of the house. His bed, which had become their bed sometime in the hours after that kiss in his office. She reached across the sheets, still warm from where he'd been sleeping, and tried to remember when exactly she'd stopped being afraid of him and started being afraid of losing him. The door opened, and Luke appeared with 2 coffee cups, wearing pajama pants and nothing else. Elena was still getting used to seeing him like this, relaxed, unguarded, almost normal. He handed her a cup and said she was staring. She replied that he brought her coffee, so she was allowed to stare. He said that was fair enough. He sat on the edge of the bed. He told her he has meetings today, but he should be done by 6. He thought maybe they could have dinner together, just them, no business associates or social obligations, like a real married couple. He said something like that. He hesitated, then added that her mother called his phone this morning, and she wants both of them to visit this weekend. Elena sat up straighter. She asked if he talked to her mother. He said briefly, "She's determined to meet him," and he figured they couldn't avoid it forever. His expression was unreadable. He said unless she'd rather he didn't come. She said no, she wanted him there. She's just surprised, he agreed. Elena sipped her coffee. She warned him that her mother was going to interrogate him, ask about his intentions, and whether he's treating her right. He said he can handle a protective mother. He's handled worse. He stood and said he needed to get ready. Marco will be there if she needs to go anywhere. Elena caught his hand and thanked him for saying yes about her mother. She knows family visits aren't in the contract. He squeezed her hand and said they were past the contract. She said so herself, and then he left. Elena spent the morning in a strange state of contentment mixed with low-level anxiety. Things with Luca had shifted so fast, from business arrangement to something real, from separate bedrooms to shared space, from careful distance to actual intimacy. It was what she'd asked for, but it was also terrifying. Around noon, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. A man's voice, unfamiliar, asked for Elena Carter. She corrected him automatically, saying it was Elena Duca now. The man said right, of course, Mrs. Duca now. He introduced himself as Detective James Morrison with the Metro Police. He was investigating some financial irregularities involving the Whitmore family, and her name came up in their research. He was hoping she might be willing to answer a few questions. Elena's stomach dropped. She asked about what? He said it was about her relationship with Ryan Whitmore and his family, specifically what she might know about their business dealings. His tone was friendly, but Elena heard the trap underneath. It would just be a brief conversation, maybe over coffee. He knows she's busy with her new marriage, but this investigation is important. Elena said she doesn't know anything about the Whitmore's business. Ryan never discussed that with her. He said that's fine. Sometimes people know things without realizing they know them. A comment Ryan made, something she overheard at a family dinner, it could be helpful. He paused. Or if she'd prefer, they could have this conversation at the station. But he thought coffee would be more comfortable for everyone. It was a threat wrapped in politeness. Elena's mind raced. She said she needed to discuss this with her husband first. He asked if there was a reason she needed his permission to talk to the police. She kept her voice steady and replied there's a reason she doesn't talk to anyone about anything important without consulting him. That's what marriage means. She asked for his number and said she'll call him back. She hung up before he could argue and immediately called Luca. He answered on the first ring and asked what was wrong. She told him a detective just called Morrison from Metro Police. He wants to talk to her about the Whitmores, said she came up in their investigation. Elena paced her bedroom. He made it sound like she doesn't have a choice. Luca's voice was hard. He said she absolutely has a choice. Don't talk to him. Don't agree to meet him. Don't answer any questions. He asked if he threatened her. She said, not directly, just implied that if she didn't meet him for coffee, they'd be having this conversation at the station instead. He said that was a bluff. They have nothing on her. She wasn't involved in any of the Whitmore business dealings. Morrison's fishing, hoping she'll say something useful. She heard him moving, probably leaving wherever he'd been. He said he was coming home and told her not to talk to anyone until he got there. She tried to say he didn't have to, but he said he'll be there in 20 minutes and hung up. Elena sat on the bed, her hands shaking slightly. She'd known marrying Luca would pull her dear into his world, but she hadn't expected the police to come calling. What had the Whitmores told them? What were they trying to pin on her? Luca arrived in 15 minutes, not 20, with another man Elena didn't recognize. He was in his late 50s, wore an expensive suit, and carried a briefcase. Luca introduced him as David Brennan, his attorney, Mrs. Duca. Brennan shook her hand. He said Luca told him about Detective Morrison's call. He needed her to tell him exactly what he said, word for word, if she could remember. Elena recounted the conversation as precisely as possible. Brennan took notes, asked clarifying questions, and then said this was standard intimidation tactics. Morrison knows she's married to Luca now, and he's hoping she's scared enough of that connection to cooperate. But she has no legal obligation to talk to him without a lawyer present, and he strongly advises she doesn't. Elena asked what if he comes back with a subpoena. Brennan said then they'll deal with it, but right now, he's just fishing. Brennan looked at Luca. The Whitmore investigation is getting desperate. Charles Whitmore is probably trying to deflect blame onto anyone he can think of, including Elena. They're hoping she'll say something that contradicts the Whitmore story or gives them ammunition against Luca. Elena realized this was really about Luca, not her. Brennan said bluntly that everything is about Luca when you're married to him. That's the reality of her situation, Mrs. Duca. People will try to use her to get to her husband, and she needs to be prepared for that. After Brennan left, Elena and Luca sat in his office. She felt shaken in a way she hadn't since the cathedral. Luca said quietly, I should have warned her this might happen. She asked if it would have changed anything. He said probably not, but she deserved to know. He pulled her closer. He promised Morrison won't bother her again. He'll make sure of it. She asked how. He said by making it clear that harassing his wife has consequences. His tone was cold. Morrison's not stupid. He knows who he is and what he's capable of. This was a test to see if she was vulnerable. Now he knows she's not. Because he has her protecting him? He replied exactly. He kissed her forehead. That's what this marriage means, Elena. She's under his protection, and anyone who comes after her comes after him. The fierceness in his voice should have been frightening. Instead, Elena found it reassuring. She'd spent so long being vulnerable, being the one people could hurt without consequence. Having someone who'd fight for her, really fight, with all the power and danger that entailed, felt like finally being safe. The words surprising her as much as him, she said she loved him. Luca went still. He asked what. She repeated that she loved him. She knows it's fast, and probably stupid given how this all started, but she does. Elena pulled back to look at him. She said he doesn't have to say it back. She just needed him to know. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said he doesn't know if he's capable of love. He spent so long keeping people at a distance, turning everything into a transaction. He doesn't know if he can be what she needs. She said she doesn't need him to be anything except honest with her. If he can't love her back, that's okay. But she asked him not to lie about it. He said he's not lying. He's telling her he doesn't know. He touched her face gently. What he does know is that she matters to him in a way no one has in a very long time, that he thinks about her constantly, that the idea of anything happening to her makes him want to destroy anyone who might hurt her. He said if that's love, then maybe he does love her, but he doesn't trust his own feelings enough to be sure. Elena leaned into his touch and said that was honest enough for now. They'll figure it out as they go. The rest of the week passed in a strange new rhythm. Lucas still had his meetings and his late-night calls, and his business that Elena didn't ask about. But he also came home for dinner, spent nights in their shared bed, and treated her less like an asset and more like a partner. Saturday came and they drove to Brightwater Manor together. Elena's mother was waiting in the sunroom, looking healthier than she had in years. Her physical therapy was paying off. She could stand now with minimal assistance, and her speech was clearer. Her mother's eyes filled with tears when she saw Elena. She said Elena's name and then said he must be Luca. Luca shook her hand carefully and said it was good to finally meet her. She told them to sit, both of them. She wanted to look at them properly. She studied Luca with the sharp assessment only mothers could manage. She noted he was older than Ryan was by about 10 years. He said yes. She continued that he was more dangerous from what she's read in the papers. She didn't sound accusatory, just matter of fact. She asked if it was true they say he destroyed the Whitmore family. Elena started to interject, but Luca cut her off. He said yes. He exposed their financial fraud and made sure everyone knew what they'd done. They destroyed themselves. He just helped speed up the process. Her mother said because they hurt her daughter. Luca met her gaze steadily and said that was part of it. He also had business reasons for wanting them gone, but yes, what they did to Elena factored into his timeline. Elena's mother was quiet for a moment. She said he was honest at least. Ryan used to talk around difficult questions, try to make everything sound prettier than it was. She appreciated directness. She turned to Elena and asked if she was happy. Elena said carefully that she was getting there. It's complicated, Mom. Her mother said, marriage always is. The question is whether it's complicated in a way you can live with. She looked back at Luca. She said her daughter's been through enough. If he's going to hurt her, he should do it now before she gets any more attached. Luca's voice was steady. He said he had no intention of hurting her, but he can't promise he won't because his world is dangerous and Elena's part of that now. What he can promise is that he'll protect her, provide for her, and treat her with the respect she deserves, and that if anyone tries to hurt her, they'll answer to him. Her mother said that's not exactly a romantic declaration. Luca replied, he's not a romantic man, Mrs. Carter. He's a practical one who spent most of his life alone by choice. Her daughter changed that. She's made him want things he'd convinced himself he didn't need. He doesn't know if that's love, but it's the closest he's come in a very long time. Elena's mother studied him for another long moment, then nodded. She said, all right, that's good enough for now. But Luca, if he ever makes her daughter cry the way Ryan did, he'll have more to worry about than business rivals and police investigations. He'll have her. Luca actually smiled and said he believed her. They stayed for 2 hours talking about safer topics. Elena's mother's progress, the facility, plans for the holidays. When they finally left, Elena's mother hugged her tightly and whispered that he's a good man underneath all that danger and to hold on to him. In the car, Elena said her mother likes him. He replied she threatened him, and that's not the same as liking him. Elena said she threatened him because she likes him. If she didn't, she wouldn't bother. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder and thanked him for being honest with her. He said he doesn't know how to be anything else with the people who matter. That night they had dinner on the terrace, overlooking the grounds. Luca had arranged for Teresa to set up a private table, and they ate while the sun set over the trees. It felt almost normal, like they were just a regular married couple and not two people who'd met in an alley 3 weeks ago. For dessert, Luca said he had to go to Chicago next week for business meetings for 2 or 3 days. She could come if she wants, or stay there. She asked if it would be dangerous. He said not particularly boring, mostly contracts to negotiate, and people to reassure that their operation is stable. He paused, but it would mean more time with him doing things she can't ask about. Elena considered, then said she'll come. Angela told her to build her own space within this marriage, but she wants to understand his world too, even the parts she can't ask about. He said that was probably not wise. She replied, nothing about this marriage has been wise, so why start now? They flew to Chicago on Monday in a private jet that made Elena feel like she'd stepped into a different universe. The hotel was luxury she couldn't have imagined before meeting Luca, and the meetings were held in conference rooms that probably cost more per hour than most people made in a month. Elena stayed quiet during the business discussions, observing the way Luca operated. He was commanding without being aggressive, firm without being inflexible. The men he met with, all dangerous in their own ways, treated him with respect that bordered on fear. She started to understand the weight of the reputation he'd built, the careful balance he maintained between ally and threat. On their last night in Chicago, Luca took her to dinner at a restaurant that required reservations months in advance. They were seated at a private table in the back, and halfway through the meal, Luca said he's been thinking about what she said, about loving him. Elena's heart sped up. She asked what he thought. He said he thinks he's been lying to himself about what he feels. He told her he didn't know if he was capable of love. But the truth is he's been in love with her for weeks, and he didn't want to admit it. He reached across the table and took her hand. He said she scares him, Elena. The idea of caring this much about someone, of giving them power to hurt him, it goes against everything he's built his life on. But he's tired of being alone. He's tired of treating everything like a transaction. She asked him to try being married for real, and then being honest about what he feels. He squeezed her hand. He said he loves her. He doesn't know how to do it properly, and he'll probably mess it up constantly, but he does love her. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She said he's doing fine so far. He replied he hasn't even started yet. He stood and pulled her up with him. He said, "Come on, let's get out of here." She said they hadn't finished dinner. He said he doesn't care about dinner. He threw cash on the table, way more than the bill would be, and led her out of the restaurant. In the car back to the hotel, he kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it. And Elena kissed him back with equal intensity. Things changed after Chicago. The walls Luca had kept around himself started coming down piece by piece. He talked more about his past, about the choices that had led him into this life, about the things he'd done that still haunted him. Elena listened without judgment, understanding that this was his way of letting her in. She also started building her own space within their marriage. Like Angela had advised, she volunteered at a health clinic in the city, using her nursing skills for the first time in months. She had lunch with Maria and Teresa regularly, learning the unspoken rules of being married to men like theirs. She visited her mother twice a week and brought Luca sometimes, watching the relationship between them grow stronger. 2 months after they'd returned from Chicago, Elena came home from the clinic to find Luca in his office looking stressed. She asked what was wrong. He said Ryan Whitmore contacted him and wants to meet. Elena's blood went cold. She asked why. He said Ryan didn't say, just asked if he'd give him 15 minutes at the coffee shop on 5th Street tomorrow at noon. Luca looked at her. He's inclined to tell him to go to hell, but this is partly her business too. He asked what she thought. She said she thinks she wants to be there when he meets him. She explained that he destroyed her in front of everyone, and she wants to see him face the consequences. She sat across from Luca's desk and said, "Let's find out what he wants." The next day, they walked into the coffee shop together, the same one where Elena had met Ryan weeks ago. He was already there, looking worse than last time. Thinner, older somehow, with the kind of exhaustion that came from watching your whole life collapse. Ryan stood awkwardly when he saw Elena and Luca. He thanked them for coming. Luca said flatly that he had 15 minutes and to start talking. Ryan looked at Elena, and she saw something broken in his eyes. He came to apologize. To both of them, but especially to her. What he did at the cathedral, what his family made him do, it was unforgivable. She said with a steady voice that he was right, it was. So she asked why he was there, because apologies don't undo humiliation. He said he knew, but he needed her to hear it anyway. And he needed to tell her that she won completely. His father's in prison awaiting trial. His mother moved to London to escape the scandal, and he gestured to himself. He's nobody now. No money, no connections, no future in this city. He said that she and Luca destroyed everything they had. Luca said coldly that his family destroyed itself. They just made sure everyone knew about it. Ryan said he wasn't arguing, that he was right. He turned back to Elena. He said he sees the way they look at each other, that it's real, isn't it? The marriage, the relationship, it's not just for show. Elena said quietly that it's not anymore. He said good. He was glad. Because she deserved someone who chooses her over everything else, and he never did that. Luca did. Ryan's voice cracked slightly. He came here to apologize, but also to say goodbye. He's leaving the city tomorrow, starting over somewhere else. And he wanted her to know that even though he lost everything, he's glad she found something better. She deserved better than him. He left before either of them could respond, walking out into the street and disappearing into the crowd. Elena watched him go and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual heartbreak. Ryan Whitmore had become irrelevant, a ghost from a life she'd left behind. Luca asked quietly how she felt. She turned to him and said, "Free." She spent so long being angry at him, wanting revenge, needing him to understand what he'd taken from her. But now she realizes he didn't take anything. He gave her an exit from a life that would have made her miserable. She should probably thank him. Luca said, "Let's not go that far," but he understands what she means. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best outcomes. They left the coffee shop hand in hand, and Elena didn't look back. That chapter was closed, finished, done. 6 months after the cathedral disaster that had started everything, Elena stood in the ballroom of the Belmont Hotel for Angela's charity gala. She was wearing a gown that made her feel powerful, standing next to Luca, who'd become more than just her husband. He'd become her partner, her ally, her home. Angela swept over, looking pleased. She said they looked happy, disgustingly so, actually. Elena said simply that they were. Angela said, "Good, that means her meddling worked." At Elena's confused look, Angela added, "Did she think it was a coincidence that she suggested her for that health clinic volunteer position, or that she invited her to so many lunches in those early weeks?" She was making sure Elena had support outside of Luca, something of her own to hold on to. Elena asked if she was managing her. Angela said she was helping her survive. "There's a difference," she smiled. Besides, Elena had done the same for Teresa Rizzo. She sees her having lunch with her, helping her figure out how to handle Anthony's temper. They look out for each other in this world. That's how they make it bearable. The gala continued around them. The same society that had watched Elena get humiliated at an altar now treated her like she belonged. Some of them still whispered, still gossiped about how fast she'd moved from Ryan to Luca, but no one questioned her place anymore. She was Luca Duca's wife, and that meant something. Later, dancing with Luca, Elena thought about how far she'd come from broken bride to this. This life she'd built from desperation and risk and choosing dangerous over safe. Luca asked what she was thinking about, pulling her closer. She said she was thinking about how none of this went according to plan, and about how the worst day of her life led to the best thing that ever happened to her. He asked if she was getting philosophical on him. She smiled up at him and said, maybe she's just grateful for him, for this life, for the fact that when everything fell apart, he was there to help her build something better. He kissed her softly and said he didn't help her build anything. She did that herself. He just gave her the tools and got out of her way. He told her she's stronger than she thinks, Elena Duca, and she always has been. The music played on, and they danced through the evening, surrounded by people who'd once watched her fall and now watched her rise. Elena had learned something crucial in these months. Strength wasn't about never breaking down. It was about getting back up after you did, about making hard choices and living with them, about taking risks even when they scared you. She'd been broken at an altar by a man who didn't deserve her. She'd married a stranger out of desperation. She'd walked into a world of danger without knowing if she'd survive it. And she'd done more than survive. She'd thrived. A year later, Elena sat in the sunroom at Brightwater Manor with her mother, who was walking with just a cane now. Her speech almost completely recovered. Her mother said suddenly that she's proud of her for how she's handled everything, for building a real life with Luca. Elena said it hasn't been easy. Her mother squeezed her hand and said the best things never are. When Ryan destroyed her at that altar, she thought it would break her permanently. She was so scared that she'd never recover, never trust anyone again. But look at her now. She's stronger than ever. Elena said she had help. She thought about Luca, about Angela and Maria, and all the other women who taught her how to navigate this complicated world. She couldn't have done it alone. Her mother said, none of us can. That's what partnership means, having someone who helps carry the weight when it gets too heavy. That evening, Elena came home to find Luca in his office as usual. But this time, instead of working, he was holding a folder. She asked what it was. He handed it to her and said it was the original contract they signed, the one that was supposed to govern their marriage for 3 years minimum. He's terminating it. Elena's heart stuttered. She asked what and why. He said because they're past contracts and negotiations and terms and conditions. Because what they have now is real, and he doesn't want it defined by a business agreement he wrote when he was trying to protect himself from feeling too much. He pulled her close. He said he loves her, Elena. Not because a contract says he has to, but because he can't help it. And he wants their marriage to be based on that, not on paperwork. She asked, what if she screws up? What if she does something that would have violated the contract? He said then they'll fight about it and figure it out like normal married couples do. No lawyers, no breach clauses, just them working through whatever comes. He kissed her. He's all in, Elena. He asked if she was. She said she's been all in since Chicago, maybe even before that. She took the contract and walked to his desk, feeding it into the shredder. They watched the pages disappear. Years of careful terms reduced to confetti. She asked, "So what now?" He said, "Now they just live. They build a life together without contracts or safety nets or exit strategies. They choose each other every day and hope that's enough." She said, "That's terrifying." He said, "That's marriage." Luca smiled. "But if anyone can handle terrifying, it's her." She walked into his world without flinching. She stood up to Angela Caruso and survived humiliating dinners with men who've killed people. She turned a fake marriage into something real. Terrifying doesn't stand a chance against her. Elena laughed and pulled him closer. Outside, the sun was setting over the grounds they both called home now. Inside, the house felt warm and lived in, filled with the life they'd built together, piece by complicated piece. She thought about the girl who'd run from a cathedral in a ruined wedding dress, desperate and broken, with nowhere to turn. That girl was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd learned that sometimes the worst moments led to the best transformations. Ryan Whitmore had meant to destroy her. Instead, he'd freed her to become someone better, someone who knew her own strength, someone who could walk into danger and come out the other side, not just surviving, but thriving. And Luca, who'd offered her a contract when she needed salvation, had given her something far more valuable. A partnership built on honesty, respect, and the kind of love that grew from really knowing someone, darkness and all. The words were easy now, natural, as she said she loved him. He said it like a promise, like a choice he was making every day. He said, "I love you too." He told her to come on. "Let's go upstairs. He's done working for the night." They walked through the house together, past the office where they'd signed that first contract, past the foyer where she'd arrived, soaking wet and desperate, up the stairs to the bedroom they shared. Every room held memories now, of fights and reconciliations, of learning each other, of building something real from a foundation of calculation and necessity. Elena Carter had died at an altar, humiliated and heartbroken. Elena Duca had risen from those ashes, stronger and fiercer, and finally completely free. And as she fell asleep in Luca's arms that night, Elena knew with absolute certainty that every terrible moment, every hard choice, every risk she'd taken had been worth it, because they'd led her here, to a life she'd never imagined with a man she'd never expected, building a future that was entirely her own. The cathedral disaster hadn't destroyed her. It had been the first step in her transformation from victim to survivor to something even better. Someone who knew her worth and refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. And she deserved this. All of it. The happiness, the security, the love that had grown from the most unlikely circumstances. She deserved a husband who chose her every day, who protected her fiercely, who loved her despite his own fear of feeling too much. She deserved the life they were building together, complicated and dangerous and absolutely real. Ryan Whitmore had thrown her away like garbage. Luca Duca had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, and Elena had found her own strength in the space between those two truths, learning that sometimes the most dangerous decisions led to the strongest rebirths, that sometimes choosing risk over safety was the bravest thing you could do, that sometimes the person you became after everything fell apart was better than the person you'd been before. She'd survived the worst day of her life. She'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. And she'd proven that Elena Duca, once Elena Carter, once a girl who ran from a cathedral in tears, was exactly as formidable as she needed to be. Not despite what she'd been through, but because of it. The story that had started with humiliation and desperation had become something else entirely. A love story, a transformation story, a story about finding strength in unexpected places and building a life worth living from the ruins of dreams that had never really been yours to begin with. In the end, that was all that mattered.